because we have only 2 seats for the congressman. I
Okay.
told you, Dr. Brownwell, the secretary, and you.
Yeah.
You said it lovely. Yes. And then yes. Okay. And then you introduce Rita, and Rita introduces Secretary Perry. Yeah. You can come back in, or you can go down and sit. And then do you want to, after the secretary, do you want to introduce Senator Murkowski? Are you comfortable with that? So just pop back up on the stage. Senator Murkowski. Yeah. Murkowski. Yep. Okay. Yeah. And then Congressman Fleischman. I can do that, or I can write it down for you. Okay. Hit it.
Good morning, everybody. Are you listening to me? Hello? Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the White House. My first time in the White House, I was telling Ed, it was 30 years ago. I was a fellow here, studying in D.C. So, see me here, a long way. Okay, I think the fact that we are here in our last session, in our last journey of this magnificent event is a very good sign of the support of the United States to this event and to IFNEC activity. So, thank you. Thank you. The White House is a symbol of many things, but today is a symbol of our work, of the importance of our work. So I want to thank you for your cooperation. I want to thank the country members of IFNEC for our work, and I want to thank the companies. I want to thank the entrepreneurs that for many years are investing in this industry. As I said last night, the complicated times are ending, and I am sure that good times are coming. So thank you very much for coming here. Thank you very much for your participation. This journey begins now, so I want to invite my colleague and friend Rita Maranwal from the United States Department of Energy. She is the Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy. So Rita, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second day of the International Framework for Nuclear Energy Ministerial Conference, bringing the world SMRs and advanced nuclear. This morning, I have the very distinct pleasure of introducing the Secretary of Energy, Rick Perry. For the past 2.5 years, Secretary Perry has been a staunch champion of nuclear energy. He has worked tirelessly on executing the administration's priority to revive and expand the U.S. civilian nuclear sector in the United States and support global nuclear energy cooperation. I want to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Secretary for his leadership, his dedication to changing the world through nuclear innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary Perry. Thank you.
You're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. Oh, Rita, thank you very much. What a great privilege to be here today, and to, Ed's good always to be in your company and to be talking about the issue that is before us today. And Rita's done a fabulous job as our Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy as we've traveled across the country, and I can't think about the great team that I've been associated with over at the department over the course of the last 3 years. Susie, you've been a real treat to get to work with, and as you all will hear, she's kind of the catalyst for getting today done, organizing it, and she has been as powerful an advocate of nuclear energy as we have in this country, and certainly in the administration. And I know, Ed, you've been by my side through this entire process, and thank you for not only being a great advocate for Susie, but for also the whole team that we've been able to put together at the Department of Energy. And Susie is now she is the chairman, I think is the proper word, of IFNEC, which is the International Framework of Nuclear Energy Cooperation. So I like IFNEC is easier to say than that whole mouthful. But anyway, on behalf of President Trump and the American people, let me welcome all of you to the nation's capital and the Eisenhower Executive Office building. This building is named after a truly extraordinary individual, Dwight David Eisenhower, who, by the way, was born in Texas, just for the record. It was nearly 7 decades ago, in December of 1953, and President Eisenhower, he delivered a historic address to the United Nations, and it was titled Atoms for Peace. And he, having been the supreme commander of the Allied forces in World War II, he understood as well as anyone the sober new world of atomic energy. And so in his speech before the UN, he proposed a framework for preventing the spread of those weapons. But Eisenhower did something else as well. He laid out a sweeping vision for humanity, a vision of harnessing nuclear power for what he called the arts of peace. Eisenhower called for the dramatic and civil expansion of that power so prosperity could spread to literally the ends of the earth. In the years that followed, nuclear energy, here and elsewhere, it grew by leaps and bounds. But sadly, over time, that dream, that hope, that vision began to grow dim. And in some quarters, it was nearly extinguished. And a big reason was, quite frankly, fear. Fear about the safety of nuclear energy. And that fear nearly paralyzed policymakers across the developed world, including right here in the United States. Across the decades, it impeded the construction of new reactors. It drove the cost of construction literally through the roof. It threatened the operation of already existing reactors. And today, it poses a long-term risk to the reliable functioning of electric grids everywhere. And that same fear remains exactly what it was decades ago, and that is it's clearly unfounded. Compared to any other source, nuclear energy is safe energy. Nuclear energy is clean energy. Nuclear energy is reliable energy. And today, nuclear energy enjoys rock-solid support right here at the White House, from President Trump, who recognizes those advantages, all the way through to, you're going to hear in a minute, our appropriations, the man that carries our appropriations in the House, Chuck Fleshman, the congressman. If there is a greater supporter of nuclear energy in this country, I don't know who he is, and you're going to have the opportunity to say thank you to him in a moment as he comes and talks. But so thanks to the President, thanks to Susie, thanks to the men and women in this audience, Ed, you, the chairman, Lamar Alexander, our chairman. You're going to hear from Lisa Murkowski in just a moment. Say thank you to those individuals, because it's been because of their push, their desire, their understanding of the vision that this administration is promoting peaceful nuclear power as an indispensable energy source for our nation and the world. So the question, and I think an appropriate one, is how are we advancing nuclear energy? And let me answer that question with one word, and that one word is innovation. Thanks to innovation, we are increasing the longevity and the performance of today's nuclear reactors. By partnering with industry, we're extending their lifespan beyond the current span of 60 to 80 years while driving down the cost and the performance up by developing technologies like accident-tolerant fuels. And thanks to innovation, we are striving to bring tomorrow's technologies to market. I see some of our friends in the industry who are out there doing that today, and we got some great new technologies that are coming on board. These small modular reactors that we had the first ever conference in Europe. I think 25 plus countries represented as we talked about the potential for small modular reactors, and I'm so excited about what I saw there. We got programs like the Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear. The acronym on that one is GAIN. And again, the excitement for me is to be able to go talk about American technology, in this case, with the small modular reactors. They're smaller, they're more flexible, they require less investment than today's reactors. They can be placed in remote locations around the world. And that's why last year President Trump, he signed 2 key bills into law to speed up development and licensing of these advanced reactors. For the President and this administration, revitalizing nuclear energy is part of an innovation-driven, all-of-the-above energy strategy for our country, one that seeks to deploy every fuel that we have. And it's precisely this strategy that faces this relentless opposition from the same forces that sought to derail nuclear energy for decades and are shutting down key nuclear plants like the Indian Point plant in New York. Rather than all of the above, they favor, I guess you'd call it, none of the above. In the name of clean energy, they would take every fuel, besides renewables, completely out of service. Now, let's be clear about something. What they want is both unnecessary and detrimental. It is unnecessary because the International Energy Agency just yesterday released a report warning that the world won't reach the environmental goals laid out by certain countries based on continued high emissions. America has chosen a different path, precisely because we embrace the power of innovation over the heavy hand of regulation. We continue to lead the world, including every signator of the Paris Agreement, in reducing energy-related carbon emissions without sacrificing one single fuel, one bit of growth, one iota of opportunity in the process. And besides being completely unnecessary, what the renewables-only crowd proposes is inescapably detrimental. It would imperil the continued flow of electrical power upon which our entire civilization depends. Simply stated, if a nation's grid includes nothing but renewables like solar and wind, what happens when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow? What happens when the power goes down and it stays down? What happens to hospitals and schools? What happens to homes and businesses? What happens to fire and police departments? What the world needs is 24/7 energy, energy that is on-site, energy that can be stockpiled, energy that powers the grid of nations, regardless of the weather. And besides coal, there is just one source on the planet which unmistakably fits the bill, and that's nuclear. Time after time, when parts of our grid were strained to the breaking point, it was nuclear as well as coal-fired plants that came to the rescue, keeping the lights on, keeping the trouble away. Now, clearly the stakes are high. If the nothing but renewables approach prevails, blackouts and other signs of intermittent power would rapidly spread through developed countries. And beyond the developed world, the stakes are infinitely higher. If we look at a satellite image of the globe, we see vast tracts of land that are shrouded in darkness. Those images reveal a stark reality. More than 1 billion people are completely without electricity. They are trapped in energy poverty. If we ban every non-renewable, including nuclear, we could lock them into that state, maybe forever. And I think that would be unconscionable. We can change that grim reality. We can disperse the darkness. We can bring life-changing power to those people. We can provide, in Eisenhower's words, abundant electrical energy in the power-starved areas of the world. Imagine how nuclear energy, including SMRs, can really help. Imagine delivering it everywhere. Imagine bringing light to even the smallest villages and the faraway hamlets around the globe. Imagine families around this world receiving the life-giving power of truly reliable, affordable electricity. Imagine power for their homes, power for their schools, power that they have never seen in their lifetime. Imagine growth being spurred. Imagine opportunity unleashed. Imagine untold wealth created where once there was only destitution and poverty and despair. Imagine our fellow human beings rising up from that poverty, reaching for the stars, fulfilling their God-given calling and dreams. You see, that's what reliable energy can do. That's what nuclear energy can do. So, Susie, let's make it happen. Let's make this world be brighter, be more exciting because of what we're accomplishing right here today. Thank you all, and God bless you. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Ed.
right, now that we're all charged up, you all are very, very fortunate. We have basically with us early this morning the powerhouses of government that support nuclear energy. And it is my privilege to be able to introduce to you Senator Murkowski from the beautiful state of Alaska, who will speak to us next. She has a very busy day today, and I very much appreciate her taking the time to come and address all of us with her thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Murkowski.
Dr. Baran, well, thank you, and good morning to you all. As has just been noted, we've got a busy day in the Capitol. On the Senate side, we're actually getting some work done. We'll have the opportunity to have the current Deputy Secretary of Energy, Dan Brouillette, before the committee for his confirmation hearing to be Secretary of Energy. So as much as I enjoy working with Secretary Perry and all that he has done, we are looking forward to welcoming soon-to-be Secretary Dan Brouillette. I want to thank, yes, that is a good. It's good to be with you this morning. Clearly a very distinguished group that is committed to the peaceful use of nuclear power. I want to thank those of you who've come a long way to be here. I'm sure that the past couple days have been productive and informative. I want to recognize and thank Secretary Perry for his invitation to not only be here this morning, but really his leadership, his direction at the Department of Energy for these past several years. He has clearly recognized the value of nuclear energy, the global need for it, and the potential for advanced reactors to provide clean energy around the world. And you just heard that very clearly articulated in a very strong and really very visionary way. I do think it's somewhat interesting that he, from the large, great state of Alaska, an oil-producing state, and me from a larger, great state, Alaska, also an oil-producing state, that both of us stand before you this morning as really unabashed advocates of the potential for nuclear, and particularly advanced nuclear. We're looking very keenly in my state of Alaska to be hopefully an early adopter of this new generation of reactors. And you might say, well, that doesn't seem to make sense. Your focus has always been oil, certainly now the potential for natural gas. Why advanced nuclear? And I will just suggest to you that there is a lot in this for a place like Alaska. While we are an energy producer, we are also a place where energy is just very expensive. It is just as simple as that in many parts of the state. In some of our remote communities, their power is generated still by expensive, dirty diesel-powered generation. And that diesel is barged in maybe once or twice a year if you're lucky, or flown in, which is far too often the case. So at a time when we think of relatively affordable energy in parts of my state, energy costs upward, well, in terms of the price that you're paying for your diesel, between $7 and $10 a gallon. So when you think about what that means to keep your lights on or to keep buildings or our homes warm in a cold place, it adds up very, very quickly. So we look to the potential for very small or micro reactors to help some of these communities to reduce their energy costs while still providing reliable and emissions-free power. An added bonus for these communities would be that the fuel for microreactors might only need to be brought in, say, once a decade. This is a huge benefit for these communities that are not accessible by road. some 80% of the communities in my state are not road accessible. So again, you're limited with your transportation and how you bring fuel source in. So for us, looking to power a small community or, say, a remote resource development project, these are opportunities at a time and a place that are incredibly significant. I think we recognize that conventional U.S. nuclear industry has been struggling to stay ahead in recent years. We've seen plants close years before the end of their useful life, and the renaissance that we talked about in the early 2000s has never really quite materialized to where we had hoped it would be. Today, there are just 2 units under construction here in the United States, and this slowdown has led to a decline in reactor exports in other countries who are then stepping up to fill that void. So what could change that? I think perhaps more than anything else are what we have with the potential for advanced nuclear reactors. As was mentioned, I'm chairman of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee here in the United States Senate, and I can assure you that these technologies are drawing interest not just from the administration, as you have heard very clearly this morning, but also a very large and fortunately a very bipartisan group of congressional lawmakers. And what you're seeing, slowly but surely, we're putting policies in place to support advanced reactors and to truly make them a reality. Over the past couple years, we've worked together to enact bills that will establish a pathway for research, for development, for demonstration, and for deployment. A couple of the measures that we have moved forward are the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, as well as the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act. And what they do is they effectively bring together the public and the private sectors to facilitate reactor development, to help streamline the licensing approval process at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they should also speed the process for approval and decrease the regulatory costs of advanced reactors, all while ensuring world-class levels of reactor safety. Now, separate from these measures that have moved into law, we've also worked to increase federal funding for nuclear energy research. We've increased it by 25% since 2017. So there's a real investment on the appropriation side towards the research. So these are some of the preliminary steps. But now we have to actually build the reactors. And that's why I've introduced subsequent legislation. We call it the Nuclear Energy Leadership Act. You may have heard it referred to as NELA. It's drawn a bipartisan group of 19 Senate co-sponsors, which is pretty good. We'd like to get more on that. But what NELA will do is focus the Department of Energy on demonstrating advanced reactor concepts, including the first 2 by 2025. So we're making a push, and we're setting a deadline there. We require the department to ensure that high-assay, low-enriched uranium fuel is available for them. We authorize a versatile test reactor, which is critical for testing the fuels and the materials used for the advanced reactors. We also extend university scholarships, fellowship programs, and we allow the federal government to be an early adopter of advanced reactors for national security purposes. So NELA is then this next step in assuring that U.S. policy is ready for and capable of facilitating advanced reactors. But, thank you. So that's one step of it. But you also need the financing. You need the financing to assure that our own competitive position is facilitated. We need that pathway to international partnerships. So in July, I unveiled a new Strategic Energy Initiative, the SEA Act. This is designed to help us make the most of where we are now and really carry it into the future. So this strategy acknowledges that, well, here in this country, we're securing our position of strength. What we know is that other countries Our allies, our trading partners, great powers, and our rivals are also working hard to establish their own positions of strength within the global energy system. And that global competition and the demand for energy outside the United States, which continues, of course, to increase sharply, requires a new global approach to our nation's energy future. Kind of bottom line here, we talk a lot about MOUs. We have workshops in some exotic locales. But in fairness, that's no substitute for the real deals, for the real projects, and really the real money if we want an effective global energy strategy. So what we need to do, we need to get tangible results. We just can't talk about it. The rhetoric is good, but we've got to see real results. So solid deals with secured financing, offtake agreements, and delivered cargoes. These are what really guarantee the jobs. Energy-based prosperity requires long-term investments and relationships which ultimately form the basis for any enhancement to our national security. Civil nuclear projects are impossible without the diplomatic agreements and the substantial government-backed financing. The relationships that develop from those projects provide decades of further partnership. So if the United States really wants to be in the game, which I believe we must be, and to actually compete, we know that we've got to step up here. And the strategic environment is a competitive one. We know that. Expanding the global reach of American energy requires a robust strategy that harnesses our nation's vast means to secure prosperous ends. So while I haven't necessarily spoken about this in public previously, in October, I launched an effort with several of my colleagues in the Senate to urge the Development Finance Corporation to support civil nuclear energy projects overseas. So we've got 5 other senators, including my ranking member on the Energy Committee, Senator Manchin of West Virginia, and we've co-signed a letter that we sent to the head of the new agency. So building on the Strategic Energy Initiative, which we have advanced, I've also released a discussion draft of the Strategic Energy for America Act, again, the C Act, which I referred to earlier. That measure should allow us to sharpen our tools of statecraft through a rational, long-term approach. And I think we know that we've got to have that longer-term strategy, that vision that is articulated and well laid out. And that's what the C Act really does. It provides a framework to strengthen our nation's geopolitical posture. It's a conversation builder, effectively, around the kinds of international financing structures that we need in order to compete in global nuclear markets. And it provides a series of next steps that we can take to assure America's energy reach both at home and abroad. So know that the work that you all are doing, very, very important, equally important, sharing mutually beneficial approaches to ensure the peaceful use of nuclear energy across the globe is something that we all have a stake in. So thank you for the good work that you do. We look forward to working with you, and hopefully my remarks this morning give you a little bit of a framework of what we are doing on the legislative front in tandem with what the administration is doing to ensure America's leading role in this very important space. So thank you very much for your contributions. Have a good morning.
Later this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and so our last exciting keynote address for this morning is from not the West Coast, but from the eastern side of the United States. Congressman Fleischmann is also a very big champion for nuclear energy. I was just in his state last week visiting Oak Ridge National Lab, so that was a nice visit. And so here we have ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Fleischmann to give his remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's always the House that gets to go last, right? Welcome for the United States House of Representatives. I'm Chuck Fleischman. I hail from the great state of Tennessee. I want to thank Rick Perry, a great Texan, but as we all know, Tennessee, Davy Crockett, Sam Houston, and a host of others were very instrumental in the birth and success of the great then Republic of Texas and later state of Texas. When I came to Congress in 2011, I live in a city, Chattanooga. For most of you all, that is the great Chattanooga Choo Choo. You've heard that song, and it's a great city. It's doing so well. But up the road a pace was a place called Oak Ridge. And I was graduated from the great University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I see Wes here. Very good. You got your orange tie. But when I was in Knoxville and when I was in Chattanooga, I never realized the great treasure that was in the city of Oak Ridge. We've got a great national laboratory there. We've got the Y-12 plant there. We've got the uranium processing facility that we're building there, which is state-of-the-art. We've got one of the best cleanup missions in the country on the EM side. So I like to just say that, like we used to say, in antiquity, all roads lead to Rome. In DOE world, all roads lead to Oak Ridge. Having said that, I do want to thank Secretary Barnwell. Rita, thank you so much for your leadership. Secretary Perry has done an exemplary job, and I have worked very well with him. I look forward to working with our new secretary. I met with him the other day. Dan Bruyette is going to do an outstanding job, and we are going to be left in very able hands. I would be remiss if I did not thank Susie. Susie, where did she go? Well, Susie stepped out. Oh, right behind me. Thank you, got my back. Susie has done an exemplary job in getting the administration's great message out about being pro-nuclear. Whether it's the Atomic Wings program or the Millennial program, we've got to get young people excited about that. Because if you don't come from a great community like Idaho, I know I saw the Idaho National Lab Director here today, or from Oak Ridge, or a community that is very nuclear friendly, you're not going to necessarily know what's going on. America is going through a manufacturing renaissance. I want everybody to know that, because I'm going to talk about the nuclear renaissance, but again, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the manufacturing renaissance. I was born in 1962, grew up in the world where they talked about, well, where was that last barrel of oil going to come from, energy crisis and the like, and obviously nuclear became a very strong, reliable, safe, clean source for nuclear power. But we built these big nuclear power plants, and they did our country and they did the world well. But there was a time where people said, gosh, America, manufacturing, those jobs are going to go abroad, it's going to be gone, and the like. Well, I'm here to tell you it has come roaring back. In my great state of Tennessee, we're one of the great states, this is my infomercial, to come and do business in the great state of Tennessee, whether you're manufacturing widgets or modular nuclear reactors. We make it easy for people to come and do business in Tennessee. But manufacturing, nuclear is going through a renaissance as well, and that is very important. And America needs to be part of that enlightenment, and we are. If you remember the first we looked at the Renaissance, where art and reason and literature just blossomed. Nuclear is going to go through that, and it is. Now, how do we get there? When we talk about what's going on the Hill, and I do want to thank the Trump administration for its commitment to being pro-nuclear and to having such a strong position to revive our civil nuclear programs. But we've got to look at where the funding comes from. And Senator Murkowski, I just visited her great state in Alaska with our Coast Guard. Just a wonderful state, and I appreciate everything the senator is doing on the Senate side. But when you're talking about senators and you're talking about people in the House, you've got to refine it a little bit more, because there are two types of folks who serve. There are authorizers and there are appropriators. Now, That's something that kind of gets lost because sometimes we talk about Republican and Democrat, we talk about senators and representatives, but we've got to drill down a little bit further to get to the distinction and difference between authorizers and appropriators. In a nutshell, I love authorizers, but as an appropriator, yes, I do, little hint, but as an appropriator, we realize that we are really in the minority. What that means is an authorizer would be that special House or Senate member that actually passes laws that give us a framework. But unless we as appropriators, the money people, the financiers, come through with robust budgets through the energy and water bills in the House and Senate, a lot of these great projects do not come into fruition. And I am here to say there is tremendous bipartisan and bicameral House and Senate Republican and Democratic support on the appropriation side. We finally got through. Thank you. We finally got through that dreaded sequester, those caps that were out there on the discretionary side. So when we get together and we put together our budgets, the energy and water bill is usually one of the least contentious bills of the 12. And in my other hat that I wear is I am the Homeland Security ranking member, highest Republican. So that is the most contentious of our 12 bills. So I can definitely differentiate between non-contentious and contentious. But what are we doing? At Oak Ridge, at Idaho, at our great national labs, we are seeing that nuclear renaissance come into fruition. SMRs have been in the dialogue with some great companies like NuScale and others since I have been in Congress. Secretary Moniz and I used to have those conversations, and he always argued for more SMR models, and today we are looking at that. Very important. But we have moved beyond that. In addition to that, the microreactors that are not only going to have an ability and a DOE purpose, but also for DOD. The Department of Defense is looking at these technologies. But in order for us to lead and to have an American truly manufacturing renaissance, we are all going to get together. And I know we have some folks from around the world today. I want you to know America is back manufacturing, and America is going to lead in this nuclear space again. We are equipped, we are together, we are going to work forward, and we have some of the best companies in this room and in this country to lead us with research, with technology, with engineering. We actually have that. And I also want to say our universities are leading the way, whether it's the great University of Tennessee in Knoxville, our nuclear engineering program, I think, is second to none, but we've got other great programs around the country. But we need to get into rooms and tell young people who say, I want to be a civil engineer, I want to be a chemical engineer, well, I want to be a nuclear engineer, because that market will be there. In conclusion, I want to say this. Obviously, this is a divided town in many, many ways. We see what's going on today. But as we work together, this is one of the areas I really think that America can and will lead the world, and those partisan and bicameral distinctions and lines sometimes do and will wither away. So I'm here to say, if you've got a company, large, small, mid-size, if you have an avocation in this area, get on Capitol Hill. Talk to the House, talk to the Senate. Yes, talk to authorizers, but come and see appropriators. With these robust budgets, what we do today is going to lead our great nation, America, in the future. And yes, tell the world we are open for business. Given a level playing field, the United States will compete and beat anyone in the world in this sphere. America is back for the nuclear renaissance. We will be that shining light. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our speakers. And next we have global perspectives on the state of nuclear. I will introduce all four. We'll have them come up one at a time, starting with Bill Magwood, the Director General of the Nuclear Energy Agency. He'll be followed by Mikhail Chudakov, the Deputy Director General of the IAEA, followed by Agneta Rising of the World Nuclear Association Director General, and then Maria Korsnick, our President and CEO of the Nuclear Energy Institute. So please welcome Bill Magwood.
Good morning. It's a hard act to follow what you just heard, I think, but let me see what I can do. Well, first, let me say it's been a great pleasure over the last few days. I think this has been an extraordinarily successful IFNEC gathering. Again, Susie, it was your vision originally. Congratulations. I think this has been tremendously successful. And I want to take a moment to recognize many of my U.S. colleagues who are here. As many of you I've worked with for many, many years. It's good to see you in this venue. From particularly the DOE colleagues, Alicia, who's telling everyone what to do today, as you've heard. That's like coming home again, you know, having Alicia tell me what to do. And also that I was really pleased that so many university department heads are here. Those who I've worked with for many years, and you know the hard times we went through in the past, and now things are so positive, and it's great to see so many of you here. So so welcome, and my international colleagues, including my NEA colleagues who are here. Many of you have come from very, very far away, with strange customs and strange languages. Canadians, in particular. But I appreciate seeing so many of you here, and many of you I've worked with at the NEA very closely from all over the world, and it's great to have you here in my place, my home place, and it's a real pleasure to have you here. So my mission today is to talk about the global picture on nuclear, and of course I have about 6 or 7 minutes to do that. And one of the things that I've thought about a lot is that it's a very complex time. And I've recently been reading some old classics, and I've been reading A Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens, one of the greatest writers in English. And of course, his book begins very famously, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And I feel that way about where we are today. In terms of the worst of times, it's very easy to recognize that things in some corners are not going very well. As you heard from previous speakers, there are nuclear power plants in the U.S. and other countries are being shut down for economic reasons. We are all very much aware of the state of some of the projects in Western countries, the huge cost overruns, the schedule overruns by a decade or more. And as an American in Paris, as someone who's working in the international venue, I'm amazed to see in many countries just talking about nuclear energy in terms of a sustainable energy future is controversial. It actually raises arguments, and people become actually quite upset when you say that. As you can hear, leadership in the U.S. doesn't look at it quite that way. It's a little more positive. So that creates a very strong impression that things are not going well. However, you're all here. Why are you here if things are so dark? What is it that you're seeing that that brings you from all over the world to come to this meeting and have this discussion? I find that when I meet with people in the nuclear sector these days, they are not depressed. They are not forlorn at all. They are actually quite optimistic, and it's actually quite interesting. And I think there's a good reason for that, and that is because there is light at the end of the tunnel. And the light that I think people see comes from the context that we see today, which is the fact that despite the very strong rhetoric regarding climate change and the need to protect the environment, despite the vast amounts of money that have been invested in renewable energy around the world, despite all of that, we still see today that the level of use of fossil fuels are exactly where it was 20 years ago. That emissions are actually higher now than they have ever been in the history of the world. That emissions in North America and Europe are going up, despite everything that's happened so far. Well, that tells you that things are not working very well. And when I meet with ministers from different countries around the world, I can tell you that the level of uncertainty that they have is as high as it's ever been, maybe ever. They don't know how they're going to meet the commitments they've made. They don't know how they're going to reduce their emissions. They don't know what the energy future really is going to look like. And this, I think, has created an environment where there is an opportunity for nuclear that is coming. It's not here today, but very soon, I think, there'll be a very important window of opportunity for new nuclear power plants to be built in many countries, including countries that would never have considered building nuclear in the past, specifically because of the technologies that we've been talking about, specifically because of small modular reactors and advanced reactors with very high performance in terms of safety, with lower costs, with lower investment. That has changed the discussion in many places. I know many of you hear that. That said, we aren't there yet. There will be this window. It'll come in the next decade. We have to be ready. And if those technologies are successful, many of you who are in the industry working very hard to bring those technologies to fruition, if you're successful, you will find that there is a market for you in the next decade. You will find that in 2025 to 2030, 2035, that there will be countries around the world who are going to be very interested. But let me tell you, if you're not ready, you're going to miss this window. And if you miss this window, you will find that by 2030 or 2035, if you're not ready, if the technologies haven't been proven, if you don't show that the costs are there, if you don't show the performance, that window will close so quickly that you will surprise you. And the thing that I worry about is that window may never open again, because we will lose so much infrastructure, we'll lose so much expertise, that rebuilding nuclear from the ground up in the future is going to be very, very difficult. Now, what does that mean for the world? That means a world that becomes characterized more by its sacrifices than by its benefits. It means a world that doesn't give people the option of when to drive, when to fly, what to eat. It becomes a different future where we're constrained by the lack of resources because we're trying to protect the environment. Nuclear energy, in my view, is one way, perhaps not the only way, but really the clearest way to let us eat our cake and have it too, to protect the environment while at the same time providing for prosperity in developed countries and for development in countries that are emerging. That is the challenge. And if we fail to make that come to reality, people will look back on this time and shake their heads and say they missed the opportunity. Let's not let that happen. Let's not let that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yep. Next, Director Chudikoff, please join us. Bill, we're going to take a seat, if you can. Yeah, thank you. Welcome, sir. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And thanks, host, for inviting me as a representative of International Atomic Energy Agency to make here a speech on behalf of the agency in this nice place, White House, very symbolic. That's, it was saying a lot about the nuclear power and why we need the nuclear power for the future. I don't want to repeat that Secretary Perry already told that 1 billion people is not having energy at all, and 1/3 of people, population in the world today rely on biomass. That we need, of course, because of the climate change, because of sustainable development goals, and we need to replace 70% of carbon sources of energy on 90% by 2050 in order to avoid overheating our Earth. And you know that now already a lot of understanding among the public and the countries, and even out of 89 scenarios of IPCC, 86 includes nuclear power there already. But we also need nuclear power because actually it's only one sustainable source of energy for future. Unfortunately, I cannot show you several slides I wanted to show here. But we use, and I use in my presentation, that from our last publications, that sustainability of nuclear energy, energy return on energy invested, that not many people know that actually no one source of energy give back the energy that they consume, including that nuclear power also. 75, that the nuclear is the biggest, 75, 80%. If you take, of course, the whole lifetime and the whole mining and the whole cycle. And nuclear is the most impressive and giving back 75%. But if you use centrifuge enrichment, high density fuel, innovations, generation 4, closed cycles, long-term operation, the only nuclear can give more than 100%. Only nuclear. Do you know how much turn back energy our best friend solar? 4%. 4%. And if you use battery, include there, it's even less than 2%. Is not it offense against our future generation that we take in their resources 100% to give them 2% back? This is more offense than to leave and spend fuel if you won't have time to reprocess it. Spend fuel is a good fuel for the future. But I am not against and not here to criticize our best friends, solar and wind. This is a flavor of the day, of course. But we all specialists, we all know that we cannot create sustainable hybrid energy system for the future without nuclear. Somebody should stand by. And finally, stop robbing resources from our future generations. Leave them a nice hybrid energy system. And if you look at the different performance indicators that most amount of favorable among the nuclear, including in economic, in environmental dimensions, in social, that everywhere. There's just a couple unfavorable, or less unfavorable, like red waste, but we know what to do with them. And what we have now, so it's clear that we not need that low carbon mix of all low carbon sources of energy. What we have now, our last projection showed that now we have 449 as on November this year, a unit in operation, close to 400 gigawatt electrical installed capacity, 52 units under construction, and this is around 5% installed capacity and around less than 11, around 11, between 10 and 11% production. But in spite of this, every third low carbon kilowatt hours is nuclear. And we know that among 30 nuclear countries, that carbon footprint is lower on average 20% below the global average. Yesterday it was told that we have 900 gram equivalent carbon dioxide emissions 4 kilowatt hours for Poland, close to 900, 400 for Germany, in spite of that having 50% on renewables, and 40 for France, because they operate nuclear power. And about our projections, what our projection shows, unfortunately the picture is not so good. In low projections this year, we had even by 2050 lower installed capacity than we have now. In high projections, we almost doubling, but lower than doubling. But the production is still the same 11%. So it means that we are not fulfilling obligations. We need 25% at least in energy production. We conducted months ago our first conference, Climate Change and the Role of Nuclear Power, where for the first time that all organizations who involved in climate process, they agreed to get together and to discuss, including the United Nations. Before that, even United Nations, they didn't want to talk to us about nuclear. They're ashamed of nuclear. Now they recognize, and we for the first time collected UNDESA, UNIDA, IPCC, UNFCCC, and our best friends, OECD and AA and WNA. And this conference, we had that 79 member states participants. In spite of that nuclear, we have 30 countries in operation, operating nuclear, and 30 more is thinking to create nuclear, to add nuclear to their energy mix. And 18 international organizations and more than 550 participants. And one of the conclusions was the only energy source, nuclear is the only energy source, along with hydropower, that has demonstrated the capability to decarbonize electricity supply on a national scale and needs to be fully recognized in the world to solve its climate challenge. And for the first time, we received more than 40 million impressions in Twitter. It's never happened with any international organizations. It means that the public interested in nuclear power. And you know that one impressions and that you can pick up from the conference, from many presentations, main idea that the role and place of nuclear power actually for the future depends on the pace of deployment of nuclear power itself. That when the pace will be fast enough and good enough, you will solve all problems. And other sources of energy step aside and give way. And you will solve problems with licensing, you will solve with public acceptance, with investment, with everything that we need just go ahead. Unfortunately, we got stuck a little bit with all nuclear, including SMRs also. And one alarming, I would like to let you know that one alarming picture from our projections, that when we look on Africa, energy consumed per capita, final energy consumption, all energy, not nuclear. By 2050, the same amount like now, but the population doubling. We have plus 1.4 billion people. So it means the level of life and poverty is the same. So it will have dramatic implications for healthcare, for education, for employment, and the result on the very forced migration for the future. So only nuclear power can stop this migration and can help develop the territory to give the employment and to keep the people. So we need nuclear power. Climate change for climate, for sustainable development goals, and for stop migration also we need to develop level of life comparable with other parts of Earth. So influential factors, we were talking a lot. This is safety, demonstration, funding and financing, infra investment, electricity market, nuclear policy, innovations. Of course, we need innovations. Waste management, what to do, demonstrate, capacity building. We have examples and can see that some nuclear power plants constructed 2 years ago not working because they don't have the good stuff, not develop capacity building. Public acceptance, public acceptance. And I like, as concerned public acceptance, just recently visited Philippines, Manila, and there like the Secretary Energy, Kuzi, answered to mass media when they asked him that we have a lot of earthquakes and tsunamis and how we can construct nuclear power on Philippines. He said that we constructed nuclear power plant 30 years ago and never put in operation it, more than 30 years ago. And from this time, we had hundreds, thousands earthquakes and tsunamis, and no any crack, nothing happens with the site. Don't you think that we missed opportunity and we would live in another country, like maybe like Korea, that if we start our operation 30 years ago? That's what he said. So, most important, I think that partnership, in order to go ahead, partnership. So we need to join all the organizations who is supporting nuclear power and who understand. And we are experts. We understand the role of nuclear power. Usually that opposition, that the Green Party, they're not technical experts. This is, by the way, the problem of all COPs in any countries, that if you asking them, why you are not talking about nuclear power in Paris, in Russian Federation, also not talking, never. If you look who's visiting there, they're visiting some politicians, some environmental people, not technical person at all, not from Ministry of Energy even. That's the problem. And actually, we understand we need to strengthen partnership with all organizations. And IFNEC is a very important organization for this, to promote, to move nuclear power, nuclear energy, peaceful nuclear energy. Otherwise, we'll be blamed by the people who is now oppose nuclear power. They will tell that we were not the specialists, you were specialists. Why you did not promote and did not include nuclear power in our energy mix for the future? So we must do it, and we must explain to everybody. We must educate, starting from kindergarten, from universities and school, primary school, to educate new generation. And I like that during our conference on climate and the role of nuclear power, Professor Wade Ellison said, I think from Oxford University, I forgot. But he said, with the right education, technical education, nuclear education, in 30 years, next generation will be asking us, why did you put these horses, meaning variable renewables, ahead of nice nuclear machines? So that, let me say again that we must work together in order to promote nuclear power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DDG Chudikov, for your very impassioned presentation. Next, we have Agneta Rising from the World Nuclear Association, and we have great dignitaries speaking today, and I'd like to respectfully ask everybody, we've got to try to get back on time, and so if you can keep your remarks a little bit more on the brief side, we do have a hard stop at 12:30, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to be here. Thanks very much to IFNEC and the whole organization of IFNEC, especially to Julian Godano and Susie Jaworowski, making it possible to be here. It's absolutely fantastic to be here in the White House, and I would like to say to Julian, I think the good times are already here, so you don't have to wait for that. I think it's already happening. And thanks specifically to our hosts, because to be in a place like this all together with such a fantastic group of people is making it possible for us to make changes to move forward. And I'm trying to now follow my script, which I usually don't do, in order to keep the time. So I would like to start with saying that the use of nuclear energy is fantastic, and it is inspiring human success story altogether. Each of the world's 450 or so nuclear reactors provide consumers with inexpensive, non-polluting, and reliable energy, whilst making vital contribution to the host country's energy security and economic security. And countries such as France, Sweden, and Switzerland have proved that by using nuclear, it is possible to decouple economic growth from emission growth, and to do so over timescales that can effectively challenge climate change and environmental degradation. Taken together, the global fleet is performing its vital role better than ever, achieving an average capacity factor of 80% in 2018 that continues to show no age-related performance trends. This is what I specifically like. Even if you're getting older, it's still the same performance. And by the end of 2019, we will have celebrated a total of 5 reactors in Switzerland, in the United States, and in India, becoming the first to have achieved 50 years of operation. As the fleet performs excellently, it continues to grow, with 13 reactors having been connected over the course of the last 2 years. And including in that, soon, 4 newcomer countries will connect their first reactors to the grid. And more countries are there to follow, as we heard from Mr. Chudakov. At least 30 other countries are online. So a lot of things is happening, and we need to be there now. And there is a window of opportunity, and all the good things are just now changing to the good things, very good things. It is, of course, true that some of the first-of-a-kind new builds, particularly in developed countries, have suffered significant delays and overruns. However, the industry is working hard to take advantage of these lessons learned, and most reactors across the world continue to come in on time and on budget. If we look at the reactors that came online from the year 2000 till now, it's 90 reactors have been connected to the grid. Of those 90 reactors, most typical construction time is 5 to 7 years. And of those 90 reactors, more than 25% were built in less than 5 years. So we know how to do this. But whilst nuclear energy is undoubtedly already making a valuable contribution towards enhancing human progress, recognition is growing that it will need to do much more than it's already doing. It is the heart of the Sustainable Development Agenda. The relationship between human development and access to affordable, reliable energy is well established. A country can fundamentally enhance its health and educational standards and the general well-being of its population by consuming more energy. Any transition towards a more equitable and sustainable future must therefore be predicated on delivering access to modern, affordable, and reliable energy services to all. And we all know that that equals nuclear energy. But doing so will significantly increase energy demand. At present, the poorer half of the world's population consumes 5% of the energy enjoyed by its richer half. When that figure rises to 15%, global energy consumption will increase by the equivalent of an additional United States worth of demand. The key question facing us, therefore, is how best to supply all of that energy. At present, about 85% comes from burning of fossil fuels, more or less unchanged since 1990. But climate change, environmental degradation, the premature death of 7 million people each year because of air pollution means that we cannot continue on the same track. This presents the world with a challenge at a daunting scale, the need to reverse a growing reliance on fossil fuels while delivering more electricity and more energy to more people. It has been clear for some time that variable renewable energy sources will play a valuable role and a growing role in many countries' energy mixes. But as their deployment has increased, the consequence of costs and everything associated with the unpredictable nature, their supply has become more and more clearer. We cannot rely on this. The reality is that the modern society is depending on this steady supply of electricity, regardless of the season, the weather, or the time of the day. Nuclear energy remains the only proven, scalable, and reliable low-carbon alternative to fossil fuels, meaning that large reactors will continue to form the backbone of the low-carbon electricity systems worldwide. And alongside new technologies, including the more than 50 SMR designs that are in the works, the role of nuclear will grow. It will be deployed in more places for more purposes than ever before, based on local needs and infrastructures. Pleasingly, there is a growing recognition of the fact and of the huge contribution that nuclear energy has made to date. I have been heartened to see many signs that nuclear is moving up the agenda. During the last year, a lot of positive things have happened. Important forums have changed and started to talk about nuclear. The leadership of the United States, alongside Canada and Japan, in launching the Nice Future Initiative in 2018, ensures that nuclear is now properly represented in the Clean Energy Ministerial. And recent reports from the IPCC and the IEA have all highlighted nuclear's central and absolutely needed role in the energy transition. And in the case of the IEA, they have stipulated the negative implications of a failure to properly invest in nuclear. There will be higher emissions, higher costs, and reduced energy security if we fail to invest in nuclear. But whilst these signs are undoubtedly encouraging, progress has been slow. To my frustration, despite the clear recognition for nuclear from the IPCC, the United Nations has still not officially adopted a position on nuclear energy. They are not officially supporting nuclear. If we look to the IPCC, the middle-of-the-road scenario says that nuclear should increase 5 times from today's level. I still have a few minutes. I wanted to say that the nuclear industry is enjoying strong growth in many parts of the world, but in some of its most mature markets, plants providing valuable low-carbon electricity are at risk of premature closure. Some face uncertainty for political reasons, but many due to economic pressure rising from market conditions that are simply not sustainable. If the energy transformation that we all recognize to be necessary is to be realized, markets must be reformed to reflect the true cost of electricity provision and to incentivize investments that benefit society at large. The level playing field to allow for a proper comparison of energy technologies, desirable attributes is essential, but it's just one of a number of challenges that must be met to allow nuclear energy to flourish. The conversation around safety is another one. Nuclear energy prevents many tens of thousands of deaths every year by avoiding use of coal, and it is by some distance the safest means of generating electricity. But contrary to that reality, safety concerns continue to present an impediment to widespread support. Harmonization of nuclear regulatory processes is another task, including timely licensing of innovative designs. It is key that the assessment of energy options is done in a neutral and objective way, considering their whole health, environmental, safety, and economic benefits. Applying such criteria should mean that all low-carbon sources, including nuclear, are treated equally and can access sustainable financing, be it European Union green finance taxonomy, the World Bank and regional development banks' policies, where the task is to ensure that objective criteria are applied by national and supranational policymakers. It is still to be achieved. When I started this job, I had a 5-year plan to try to change the World Bank policy. They are still not allowing financing of nuclear. That's a big task to continue on. But whilst there are challenges to overcome, I'm more convinced today than ever before that the future of nuclear energy is bright and exciting. We can cooperate, and we can do things within the nuclear community together. We are not to compete with each other. We are going to compete with the climate challenge and other type of energy sources. There is a growing chorus of voices recognizing that nuclear energy is the pivotal technology for the clean electricity supply. Nuclear energy is innovation, and the technology develops, and SMRs come to fruition. The locations and market opportunities will continue to grow. Nuclear energy will be used in off-grid applications to decarbonize heat and to desalinate water, to generate hydrogen, and provide a fast track to a high-powered, sustainable, and clean energy system. Good times are here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Maria Korsnick of the Nuclear Energy Institute, and we have Alicia Duncan right here in the front row is going to try to help us get back on track, so she'll give a 2-minute warning just before you finish. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Here's one thing I know for sure. The nuclear industry is the best option to reliably meet the world's energy needs in a lower carbon future. And to truly understand the importance of nuclear in the United States and, quite frankly, the world, we need to understand what nuclear brings to the table and where we're headed in the days to come. It's really an honor to join you here today with all the distinguished leaders that we have from around the world. It's because of your commitment and your leadership to energy security, to innovation, that our global nuclear industry can be well-positioned for a clean, carbon-free energy future. I'm so very proud to work in nuclear, and I'm very passionate about our future. I've spent 33 years in the nuclear industry as an engineer, a licensed operator, a site vice president, and a chief nuclear officer. I know this industry well, and I know what it has to offer. In the last decades, we have seen unmatched operational excellence in the U.S. nuclear energy industry. In fact, in our history, there has never been more efficient nuclear power than there is today. Today, our nuclear fleet operates at more than 92% capacity, and just a generation ago, we were only at 63%. So our current fleet produces more than half of our country's emissions-free energy. This operational excellence is really the result of high standards, rigorous training, new technologies, power uprates, and the usage of longer-lasting fuels. We're driving down costs and increasing efficiency, and the numbers prove it. Our outstanding commitment to safely maintaining, operating, and improving our existing nuclear fleet has allowed us to do more. Today, it takes only 96 reactors to produce what just a few decades ago would have taken us 130. Our operational excellence is matched only by the remarkable innovation that's taking place in the United States today. With the support of Congress, the Department of Energy, and our wonderful national labs, U.S. companies are at the vanguard of new nuclear technologies that will change the world. These innovations are now informing the next generation of nuclear and our first new plant in 30 years. As the U.S. nuclear industry looks to the future, our next steps will be defined by innovations big and small. Led by a new generation of entrepreneurs stewarding digital technology, by 3D printers, by big data analytics, by artificial intelligence, we can now take a plant that was built 40 years ago and upgrade them with today's technology, making them efficient and long-lasting, operating with precision and the highest of standards. U.S. nuclear plants were initially licensed for a 40-year operating life, but were maintained so well, they've received regulatory approval to run for an additional 20 years. And next year, the first ever second license renewal application could be approved for another 20 years, extending a plant's lifespan to 80. So far, 8 reactors have filed for their second license renewals, and more companies have announced their intent to file applications in the coming years. The theme of this year's Global Ministerial Conference is bringing the world SMRs and advanced nuclear, and truly some of the biggest news in nuclear is coming from our new reactor designs. And as those of you in this room know, small modular reactors are not an idea for the distant future. In fact, they're here. In just a few short years, we'll be building them here in the United States. Thanks to continued R&D support from the Department of Energy and financial commitments and partnerships with the industry, nuclear will be possible in all kinds of places where larger plants simply aren't necessary to meet the community needs. In the U.S., there are a number of examples of how this future is now. The design certification for NuScale's SMR is expected next year, and they've partnered with UAMPS to build the first of their design. And then there's the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is well along in the site approval process for a potential small modular reactor. In fact, many of our utilities here in the U.S. are looking to small modular reactors to meet the future needs of their customers in an affordable and reliable way. There are many players in the U.S. that are advancing nuclear as we know it today, not only to benefit our country, but to benefit the world. GE Hitachi, Holtec, Kairos, Oklo, TerraPower, Terrestrial Energy, Westinghouse, X-Energy, and many more. They're all making significant progress towards the next generation of nuclear technology. And at the same time, a new range of voices are drawing attention to the vital role that nuclear plays. Companies like Google are driving industry-wide decisions about carbon pledges and utility generation. In fact, last year, Google highlighted the valuable role that nuclear plays today and can play in the future as we decarbonize. These conversations and commitments will expand the diversity of our grid and ensure its resilience. As nuclear technology improves, as it becomes more agile and it comes in a variety of sizes, it's going to open new markets across the globe and increase access to a reliable and clean energy. And as the next generation of nuclear technologies comes to market, we cannot forget that nuclear energy cooperation is a long-term strategic cooperation. So industrial partnerships and technology transfer and international cooperation, the United States has made long-term commitments to provide operational expertise and training around the globe. The U.S. philosophy is to work with you so that you can build the skills and capacity to successfully operate your own nuclear energy industry. And the values and shared interests between the United States and the international community provide the necessary foundation for these partnerships today, tomorrow, and 100 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our speakers. Next, we're going to move into the next session, National Perspectives and Efforts to Transform Public Perception About Nuclear from IFNEC. So I'm going to give you not necessarily a full-blown U.S. perspective. We've been talking a little bit about it yesterday and a bit today. But I think most of us would agree that folks outside of our community don't really know what we do and why we do it. So as a community, I would argue that we have a public communication problem because we don't communicate well to the public. And so in our area in the United States, we've started several different initiatives to help communicate and outreach to the public, including collaborating with the American Nuclear Society on a program called Navigating Nuclear, wherein we have a curriculum in over half of the schools in the United States, kindergarten through 12th grade, to help introduce them to what nuclear can offer to their worlds. I'm going to share with you a quick personal story, and then we'll move on to our next speakers. So over 10 years ago, I was living in South Carolina and was working for Westinghouse at their fuel fabrication facility. And my son was about 6 years old at the time, about this tall. He's about this tall now. But he did not understand what I did. Over half of South Carolina's electricity is generated from nuclear power. We lived in a 2-story house at the time. I said, here's what I do. You know everything that's on the first floor? Your video games, the refrigerator, the TV, the washing machine, the lights, all of that on the first floor turns on because of what I do. And he looked at me, and he said, oh, so the electricity that comes to the first floor from my video games is because of what you do? I said, yes. And he said, oh, okay. And he walked off. And now he knows what I do. He understands what I do. And if a 6-year-old can understand what our contribution is to their life or their lives, I argue that all of us can tell that story, right? Why do what we do, why is that important? And we can certainly be trained to tell that story. There are training options out there, and I've also been trained to tell a different story. But it is that simple. Why is what we do important to our daily lives, to the United States here, and in your home countries as well? So with that, I'm really looking forward to this discussion. Our first speaker is Chairman Toukan from the Jordan Atomic Energy Commission, and I invite him up to the stage. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really honored to be with you today in this important event addressing such a distinguished gathering of key officials in the nuclear energy sector. I would like to extend special thanks for the IFNEC leadership and U.S. colleagues for organizing this important event. I would highlight what we are doing in Jordan regarding nuclear energy and public acceptability. The current Jordanian national energy strategy sets a priority on clean energy sources, relying on renewables and to a second degree on nuclear. It includes ambitious targets to increase the contribution of renewable energy sources, especially solar, amounting to 20% of generation capacity by next year. Several countries around the globe are expressing similar interest in renewables and nuclear energy. We should explore, even for a better nuclear energy public acceptability, the synergy between nuclear and renewables. This will open opportunities for national and regional power system interconnection and integration. This synergy has been incorporated by the Jordan Atomic Energy Commission in the criteria for the selection of small modular reactors, which is the focus of our nuclear power plant project. We are seeking a good candidate for hybrid and efficient production of electricity, desalinated water, and hydrogen production. Ladies and gentlemen, Jordan has accomplished several milestones in its path to develop its nuclear energy program. The Jordan Research and Training Reactor, commissioned in December 2016, is deemed as an anchor point for researchers to carry out their experiments through the operation of its various neutron beamlines and laboratories. Currently, it is producing radioactive iodine-131, and plans are being devised to produce lutetium-177 and molybdenum-technetium-99. The impact of this development has been sensed by the medical community at large in the country, thus contributing positively to nuclear energy's posture as a major instrument of social development. The Nuclear Accelerator, the synchrotron light for experimental science and applications in the Middle East, SESAMI, represents yet another scientific achievement. SESAMI, which has been inaugurated in 2017, is providing the Middle East region with a world-class state-of-the-art facility for advanced research in disciplines ranging from physics to biology, medical sciences, and for sure, archaeology. Actually, recent experiments at SESAMI has been looking at the ancient past of the Middle East. We have recently done several experiments studying skin of ancient Egyptian mummies, as well as paint and coins from the ancient city of Petra. Hence, both SESAMI as a nuclear accelerator and JRTR as a nuclear research reactor represent a major opportunity to boost scientific research and technological advancement, and thus enhancing public acceptability of nuclear science and technology as vital instruments for development. Distinguished guests, public opinion is increasingly playing a more prominent role in societies globally. And in this respect, will have a fundamental role in the formulation of energy policies. Nuclear energy issues remain to receive considerable concern and selective attention. As a consequence, it's now recognized that the future of nuclear energy will not only depend on technological and economic factors, but also public acceptability. The Jordan Atomic Energy Commission has intensified and will expand its efforts and activities through the following schemes: conducting several public awareness campaigns to clarify any misinformation about nuclear energy, whether nationally or internationally; publishing many newspaper articles and broadcasting TV and radio interviews to introduce the nuclear projects in Jordan and the Middle East region at large; arranging public visits to Jordan Atomic Energy Commission facilities to inform and educate the public about the beneficial uses of nuclear energy; educating secondary school students and science teachers on nuclear science and technology in cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency to expand their knowledge and provide them with correct information about nuclear energy applications; and arranging visits of parliamentarian members, local community leaders, and media to nuclear power plants in several nuclear developed countries. One of the most important visits was the visit to the Palo Verde nuclear power plant in this country. In addition to national efforts, IFNEC can play an important role to advance nuclear energy's public acceptability by advancing the case for nuclear energy as a clean energy source and highlighting the synergy between nuclear and renewable energies in order to achieve the Paris Climate Agreement targets, transitioning to a low-carbon energy future; ensuring the competitiveness of nuclear power by making available favorable financing mechanisms, including carbon funds; encouraging the nuclear industry for deeper international standardization; and finally, encouraging regulatory authorities to work together for international harmonization of standards and licensing, especially for small modular reactors. In 2003, the world was talking about a nuclear renaissance, which unfortunately withered away for different reasons. Now, with the new innovations in small modular reactors and advanced nuclear. This nuclear renaissance is a reality and happening now. Thank you all.
Okay, next up, actually before I introduce our next speaker, I want to give a shout out. We have a very full room here at the White House, but I anticipate that there is also a very full room over at NEI where they're doing the watch party. So while you are sitting here, I think, pardon me? Let's wave at that camera. I don't know if we wave at this camera. You can all wave. So thank you to all the folks that are over at NEI as well. Our next speaker is Engineer Collins from the beautiful country of Kenya. If you would, my friend, come on up, and we will hear some Kenyan perspectives. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, my country perspective was supposed to be delivered by the Cabinet Secretary for Energy, but for some challenges, he couldn't make it at the last minute, and I'm going to deliver his speech. Before I see the 2 minutes hand, let me begin straight away. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I take this opportunity to thank the United States of America for hosting the 2019 IFNEC Global Ministerial Conference, bringing the world's small and modular reactors and advanced nuclear reactors. This conference is yet another impressive opportunity in reshaping the future conversation of the peaceful application of nuclear technology for electricity generation. This discussion now includes the needs of embarking countries. Kenya acknowledges with gratitude the international stakeholders and partners in its nuclear power program journey. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya attaches great opportunity and importance to nuclear developed countries' role in promoting the practical application of nuclear science and technology, which is integral in the achievement of national priorities and sustainable development goals. The government of Kenya identified 4 priority areas to spearhead socioeconomic development as stated in Kenya's Vision 2030 Development Plan. These priority areas are known as the Big 4 agenda that focuses on health, agriculture, manufacturing, and housing. In addition, Kenya's development blueprint singled out energy as a key enabler for the country's economic growth and introduced nuclear energy in the energy mix to meet the country's future electricity demand. Kenya's energy demand has risen steadily in the recent years, and we expect it to continue taking an upward trajectory. The government is working towards increasing this capacity by commissioning additional plants currently in different stages of development. Ladies and gentlemen, in March 2019, the Energy Act was enacted, and this act provides for development of framework for the development of nuclear energy as one of the sources for generation of affordable, reliable, and clean electricity in the country to meet the future electricity demand. I wish to reiterate that Kenya's consideration of nuclear energy as a potential priority in the long-term electricity generation takes into account that nuclear power is a low-carbon energy source that contributes to the mitigation of the impact of climate change and the achievement of sustainable development goals. The innovative nature of the SMRs will play a bigger role in the fulfillment of the nuclear electricity dream, not only in Kenya, but in the continent at large. I call for robust engagement of the industry players with countries embarking on nuclear power program, including Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, nuclear technology is human capital intensive. Human resource development is one of the 19 infrastructure issues under the International Atomic Energy Agency's milestone approach that a newcomer country needs to take into consideration in the development of the program. In a bid to deploy the first nuclear power plant in Kenya, the country, in collaboration with other stakeholders, has undertaken various capacity building programs aimed at preparing the country for the introduction of the NPP. For sustainability of training of the nuclear expert workforce, local universities are expected to train experts in the fields of nuclear science, engineering, and technology. One of the state universities has commenced the training of students using the Internet Reactor Laboratory. Through the ILR project, Kenya students will have access to research reactor facility in other countries. Ladies and gentlemen, stakeholder engagement and public education is critical in human confidence and acceptance to nuclear power program. In this context, Kenya has formed on the onset involved relevant stakeholders in order to create awareness and bolster confidence in the nuclear power program for peaceful use. To this end, the government has conducted meetings at national and local levels for public and leaders with support of the IEA, as well as supported respective representatives to participate in various international awareness fora. Nuclear technology is capital intensive. It is therefore commendable to note that financing of SMRs is one of the major topics of discussion at this conference. Consensus on feasible financing options will provide a great impetus for realization of the potential benefits of deploying SMRs sooner or later. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to reiterate that Kenya is committed to introducing nuclear technology for electricity generation and meeting all her international obligations. The deployment of SMR will be a game changer to many embarking countries due to its flexibility in cogeneration function ability and capability to fit in small electric grid system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Engineer Collins. Next, I would like to introduce the Chief of Staff from the Argentina Secretariat of Energy, Nerio Pediato, for the Argentinian perspectives.
So, dear IFNEC representative, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this conference. It is a pleasure for me to share with you a very brief summary about the Argentinian energy sector and the role of nuclear energy generation. As you may know, Argentina is going through a presidential transition. We believe that the new government will build upon the significant progress the energy sector has experienced in the last few years. Argentina has taken relevant steps toward normalizing and reconstructing the broken energy sector, with significant productions increase and productivity improvements. This progress relies on two pillars: significant resources, both natural and human, and the strengthening of open market conditions and regulations. According to several sources, the country ranks second in terms of technically recoverable unconventional gas resources and fourth for unconventional oil resources. The basin, known as Vaca Muerta, has already entered a development phase with 18 companies operating it. Vaca Muerta means dead cow, terrible name. We already fired the brand manager. As a result of that, unconventional oil and gas production, the amount of fractures has multiplied by almost 4, and shale gas has increased by 967% production. Unconventional production, oil and gas, will reach $7.5 billion investments. Most of our land has great potential for wind, solar, and biomass generation. This administration awarded 250 projects through public processes, which represent more than 6,400 megawatts of new renewable capacity. The increase in energy production allows us to resume export to our neighbor, especially Chile, and export LNG for the first time in Argentina's history, for the very same port we began import in 1 decade ago. As a result of these actions and other policies, we were able to eliminate a trade deficit which stood at $6.9 billion in 2013. This year, we're going to be balanced year in terms of energy trade, and Argentina should be a net exporter for the following year. As regards energy of sustainability, Argentina acknowledged that climate change is one of the major issues of this century. It is clear that the energy industry is changing faster than ever, and that there are plenty and difficult challenges to face in the energy sector, which is transitioning towards a more diversified energy mix. Our country does not use coal in its generation matrix. Let me remind you that the average OECD countries is still 26%. And the new availability of natural gas has already helped us displace liquids for power generation, and as a consequence, it has also helped us reduce emissions. While in 2015, liquids represented 13% of the mix, this year liquid will account for only 1%. Let me speak now about the importance that nuclear power has to our country. Our nuclear sector has almost 70 years history. In 1950, the National Atomic Energy Commission was created, and since then, we have always used nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. We are members of all relevant nuclear forums, and we have signed a safeguard agreement with the IAEA, so we are open to every inspection required by this entity. Argentina and Brazil are the only countries that have signed a joint security treaty and that have created by National Security Agency, ABACC. So both countries have the right to apply safeguards on materials and nuclear power and nuclear plants in each country. Argentina has the capacity to run the entire fuel cycle and is an exporter of nuclear technology, mainly research reactors and radioisotopes. We have exported this technology to Peru, Algeria, Egypt, Australia, India, and the Netherlands. We believe that the nuclear cluster is one of the most sophisticated technology industries in Argentina. Our main activities, which are under federal control, are nuclear power generation, nuclear medicine applications, irradiation plants, research and development reactors, nuclear fuel cycle, and we also run different academic institutions. Currently, we operate 3 power plants which add to 1,800 megawatts. During the last few years, we have realized significant achievements. First, the life extension project of our Embalse plant. The project was conducted by Nucleoelectric Argentina, a state-owned company, and we are proud that it has been conducted by the Argentine engineers, mainly national suppliers of high qualified services. Most of the components for the nuclear island replacement were made in Argentina. It is important to mention that it was the third CANDU reactor that has been life extended in the world, and the first that includes steam generators. It was also the first to be financed by a multilateral credit program organism, the CAF. At the same time, our country is carrying out the construction of a small modular reactor named Karen, which consists in a lower power nuclear reactor that provides 32 megawatts. It's being developed by the National Atomic Energy Commission. The current reactor is especially designed for electric supply in isolated areas. I have started talking about the progress that we made as an enormous potential we have as a cleaner energy supplier, but I haven't talked about our biggest challenge yet. It is imperative that Argentina achieves a long-lasting macroeconomic stability. This will have a great impact in our ability to attract investments and lower the cost of the financing of all projects the country must pursue. In this specific topic resides one of the 2 biggest challenges of nuclear sector. Investments are huge, and the sector is in some way competing with other energy sources like renewable and oil and gas productions. As I mentioned before, renewables, the biggest projects are only 200 megawatts. So now all the investment has to be done by the federal government. That is the biggest challenge for us. The second challenge for the nuclear sector is influenced by the first one, but it has own entity. In a developing country like Argentina, electricity costs have to remain low in relative terms to be competitive. Overall, nuclear costs still have potential to room to decrease. We believe that SMRs could be a great opportunity to reduce nuclear production costs. The country will continue to support the nuclear energy sectors as a way to contribute a cleaner and more reliable energy source. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I would like to introduce Cosmin Ghita, the CEO from Nuclear Electrica from Romania. Cosmin?
Ladies and gentlemen, firstly, allow me to express my appreciation on the topic of this panel and to express my honor for being here with you. Public communications is not just necessary or sufficient, it's actually the glue between the nuclear operator and its audiences. And I can tell you a little bit of my perspective of public communications in the nuclear industry. I've only been in this industry for 2 years. And I can say that it's similar to a joke about perfectionists. You know, when a perfectionist walks in the bar, he realizes that the bar is not high enough. So I can say that we need to focus more on this glue. And we need to realize that in able to harness and maintain the support for nuclear energy and its further development, we need to think about how do we communicate to our various stakeholders. And that's why I want to firstly thank the NEA, IFNEC, the governments of the US, Canada, and Japan for taking the leadership on nice future initiatives to communicate correctly about the nuclear industry. A couple of weeks ago, I was doing a little bit of research on human resources and employee satisfaction, and I did two Google searches, and I clicked the images tab. First, the search was nuclear industry. And guess what came up? Screenshots, excerpts from the Chernobyl 2019 miniseries. The other place that I looked is aspirational industry. It was late at night, so I couldn't come up with something smarter. And I got images of Google, Oracle, Silicon Valley, and that was just unjust for the nuclear industry. And inside the industry, we all know it. But this is a strong signal that we need to seriously tackle and implement the right measures to correct it. More than any industry, even though the associated risks are lower to other major industries, nuclear development and future role in the decarbonization mix highly depend on what people think, all categories of people. And actually, the difference between being MIT's firm source of nuclear energy, a firm source of decarbonization, and phase out could be made by a referendum. And we've seen that happen. From both my experience and observations, nuclear needs a two-pronged leadership and advocacy approach. Briefly, the top priority should be strong balance between emphasis on human resources, attracting the youngest and smartest and brightest in our industry, and public support. So you need to look at leadership inside the organization, create facilitated leadership approaches, and up our cultural organizations, but also go outside our organizations as operators and harness public support, harness financial support, and show that the benefits outweigh the risks. Obviously, this needs to start a little bit with a communications change. And I'll tell you a little bit of Romania's case. Romania is self-sufficient from an energy perspective. We're very proud of that, and we think that's something that gives our self-stability, freedom, and possibility to further promote. Even so, nuclear favorability evolved over the years. And it happened 8 years ago when Nuclear Electrica was not a publicly listed company, and being listed on the Romanian Stock Exchange, we had to review our communication strategy. So today, we are perceived as one of the best public companies, whereas some time ago we weren't. So let me share some of the results with you. In 2014, right after the company was listed, 28% of the Romanian population thought that risks outweighed the benefits of nuclear energy. Today, 44% have done that. A majority of 56% of the Romanians believe that the production of nuclear energy here is safe, whereas that used to be 21% in 2014 and 38% in 2016. A majority of 62% of Romanians today agree that the activity of nuclear electrica has a positive impact on the economy. 44% today believe that nuclear waste can be safely stored, as opposed to 21%. And the favorability level in relation to increasing the current capacity is now at 62%, as opposed to only 27% 8 years ago. So 8 years in the making, and a wrap-up measured in definite majorities. What have we done differently than others? Instead of focusing on nuclear safety alone, which paradoxically acts like a boomerang when no solid basis there, we focused on the complexity of a nuclear operator and the role that we play in the community. We're a strategic producer of energy. We're a strategic investor in the economy. We're a player in the local communities. And we're the home to 2,200 employees. So I would say that the takeaway is focusing on a single message, as the nuclear industry has done or has been doing for many years, albeit super safe, has done nothing but to diminish the appetite of it. Are you going to buy a product from a salesman simply because the salesman says he's a reliable guy? You have to look at the product and if that really works for you. And what the world's best company have been doing were to position themselves in light of the different audiences. So we started working on messaging. We started working on messaging about our role in the energy system, our ways to decarbonize. We started getting involved in the communities as being through a strong CSR campaign that we just launched, We Grow With You. And we started reaching out to universities so we can cultivate the interest in the industry. In 2017, when I just took helm, we had only 2 Romanians signed up in the Romanian Engineering University for the Nuclear Master's Program. Today we have 14. So we don't have to convince anyone anymore. I think we just have to offer to act on equal footing with all corporate actors and take our rightful place as an industry. And we can do it. We just need to focus on our audiences, their needs a little bit more, and not be ashamed to admit that nuclear is the solution to our global energy needs. Domestic pro-nuclear majorities are the very basis of today's effort, and I think that we should all think about it. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much, Kozman. So the story keeps getting better, so that's good news. Next, I would like to introduce Diane Cameron, who is the Director for Nuclear Energy at Natural Resources Canada, to give us some perspectives from the Canadian side. Diane?
Thank you, Rita. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's my privilege to lead on nuclear energy policy for Canada, and in that role, I have the perspective of being able to bring together Team Canada. And many of you have heard me talk about Team Canada many times before. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Team Canada again today. But first, I'd like to thank Secretary Perry and Deputy Secretary Brouillette, Ed and Susie and our friends at DOE for putting together this tremendous event. And it's wonderful to be here amongst so many friends. It's such an important topic, this topic of public confidence and public perception. And it's a challenging topic. I don't think we should shy away from admitting that. It's a challenging topic because many members of the public have questions and concerns about public safety, about waste management, about costs, about security, and so on. So those seem to be the main 4. Even though I'm going to spend my time talking about a Canadian perspective, specifically a domestic Canadian perspective, I'd like to acknowledge the important work that is being done in partnership with the U.S. and Japan and the other member countries that have joined us to bring nuclear energy to clean energy dialogue, starting with, but not ending with, the Clean Energy Ministerial. We need to be bringing the messages to non-nuclear audiences and to non-technical audiences. And that's a really important thing that we need to do on the international stage. But I do appreciate the opportunity to speak specifically about the domestic Canadian perspective today, because we are moving forward on SMRs in Canada. The markets are real, the customers are real. We've done our policy work, we did the economic analysis, we scrubbed our regulatory frameworks, and we anticipate multiple SMRs at multiple sites across multiple jurisdictions. And we expect those projects to start within the next 5 years, and many of them to conclude within the next 10 years. So commercialization is imminent. What we learned on Canada's SMR roadmap, though, is that the technology risks are largely manageable. Those are not the points of failure that we need to worry about the most. There are other areas that we need to focus on to enable successful commercial deployment. And one of the areas that we need to be very tuned into is public and community support. So let me begin by noting that in Canada, we have the public support to enable a vibrant and innovative nuclear sector. We have had it for over 60 years. We have had a nuclear sector from which Canadians have derived significant economic, social, geopolitical, and environmental benefits. And we know quite a lot about the landscape for public confidence in Canada. There are pockets of Canada where public confidence is higher than the national average. Okay. And that is, the closer you live to nuclear power plants and uranium mining, the more favorable you are to nuclear power. So there is higher than average public confidence in the jurisdictions of Ontario, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick. We know that millennials are more open than boomers. We know that the more passionate you are about climate change, the more likely you are to be open to SMRs. This is a strong foundation to build on. But make no mistake, while we feel a tremendous sense of opportunity and purpose around SMRs, no one in Canada has any delusions that new nuclear is going to be easy. And what it really comes down to in the context of public confidence in Canada is partnerships, the importance of partnerships. We have a complex domestic landscape, shared jurisdictions between the federal government, the provincial governments, and territorial governments. Those dynamics are what they are. In Canada, Indigenous peoples have specific constitutional rights. And this is a challenging setting, but we also have lots of experience and lots of lessons learned. And really, what it boils down to, in terms of our lessons learned, is that it's about partnerships, people, and trust. It's not so much about national consensus. It's about partnerships, people, and trust in the areas where you want to work. Many of you have heard me talk about Team Canada, and that's because SMR projects, and we'll be plain about it right now, will not succeed in Canada without Team Canada. You won't be able to do it. And one of the key frontline players are going to be the utilities, the nuclear operators. They have a direct relationship with communities. They have a direct relationship with people. So I'm going to skip ahead very quickly. There are some major pillars of public confidence that I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge. And the first one goes to people's concerns about safety. And so that is, the pillar is trust in the regulator. And here, it's not just about technical competency, which of course the CNSC has in spades, but it's about the CNSC's approach: transparency, engagement, direct contact with people, open public hearings. And this is a practice that was recently given a commendation in the IAEA IRRS peer review of the Canadian regulator. That's a pillar. Another pillar is waste management, because that's another area that people always, it's almost always the first question that people ask: what about the waste? And so here, the NWMO is another institutional pillar in Canada, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. In 2010, they launched the siting process in Canada to identify the site for our deep geological repository. It was a very thoughtful exercise based on consent-based siting. In 2010, they launched that process. Soon thereafter, 22 communities voluntarily came forward as wanting to be considered as the site for our deep geological repository. And the process has been very deliberate and thoughtful and highly engaged, and direct community engagement has been managed by NWMO to whittle that list down to 5. We're at 5 communities now, and by 2023, they'll probably whittle down and select the final site. There would have been many of those sites would have been fine, again, from a technical competency and technical geological characteristics perspective. But that process of engagement and partnerships and trust, they take time to build. So I'm going to cut to the chase now, Alicia, because I know we're out of time. You cannot antagonize people into agreeing with you. It's not just about presenting people with the facts and assuming that they're going to draw the same conclusions that you are. You also cannot take all of the project decisions and then go to the community at the end of your project and try to negotiate mitigation and accommodation. Those types of approaches we have learned in Canada, they do not work, and we do not expect them to work on SMRs. You need Indigenous engagement, you need partners, you need community engagement. But again, we've learned these lessons and we're quite good at it in Canada. So when you're ready to work in Canada, engage us. Team Canada can help you through these jurisdictions. And bringing it home to SMRs, our discussion on SMRs today, we do expect multiple SMRs at multiple sites across multiple jurisdictions. To name a few, Darlington in Ontario, Point Lepreau in New Brunswick, Canadian Nuclear Labs, Saskatchewan, and some off-grid sites. All of them are moving in a very serious fashion in the very near term, which is why this engagement and these partnerships and trust and relationships need to be built now. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll wrap up this session with our last speaker from around the other side of the world, Toshio Sano, who is the Commissioner of the Japanese Atomic Energy Commission. He will provide us some Japanese perspectives on this topic.
Welcome. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm grateful and honored to speak at the White House today. I'll make a brief remarks about Japan's national perspective, focusing on nuclear innovation. Before getting into the core of my remarks, I'm going to briefly discuss Japan's nuclear energy policy in the Strategic Energy Plan, which was published last summer. According to the Strategic Energy Plan, Japan has 2 different time frames, 2030 and 2050. Regarding the 2030 outlook, there are 3 elements that Japan considers important. First, nuclear energy will remain an important power source. And this message is consistent with the International Energy Agency's report published this year. In this report, Fatih Birol, the executive director of the IEA, is indicating the importance of nuclear energy as, quote, alongside renewables, energy efficiency, and other innovative technologies, nuclear can make a significant contribution to achieving sustainable energy goals and enhancing energy security. The second is reducing dependency on nuclear power generation. Compared to the pre-Fukushima level, which was about 30%, the Japanese government has decided to reduce nuclear power generation to about 20% by 2030. And to accomplish this goal, Japan will implement the third element, namely restart of selected nuclear power plants and continuous improvement of safety. Safety is always the first priority for restarting. Based upon the continuous improvement of nuclear safety, Japan will restart nuclear plants with authorization by Nuclear Regulatory Authority, and the local cooperation. Under the 2050 outlook, one of the key elements is, at this relatively long time frame, nuclear energy is an important path to decarbonization. In the Strategic Energy Plan, it is our goal to meet nationally determined contribution under the Paris Agreement, which is to reduce greenhouse gases by 26% by 2030, compared to the 2013 level. To achieve this goal, Japan is going to pursue every possible way. We believe nuclear energy should play a significant role. And that is why Japan continuously pursues nuclear innovation even without new nuclear projects at this moment. Using the factors indicated in the Strategic Energy Plan, let me discuss the 6 potential issues that needs to be considered. Those issues are safety, non-proliferation, radioactive waste, multi-purpose use, mobility flexibility, and economical efficiency. Each of these factors are important for nuclear innovation, but again, let me remind you the first priority is the safety. Japan would like to contribute to global nuclear safety by sharing the lessons learned from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident. Including safety, we think all 6 these factors are important. How do we tackle these issues? Let me give you a brief summary of how Japan is approaching it. We believe that the innovative technology should be developed by the private sector. The role of the government is to support research and development policy and show the future vision for nuclear technology, while the role of the private sector is to take the lead in the innovative process, leading to introduction to the actual market. On the other hand, it is also true that there is a financial risk in nuclear R&D programs, which is difficult to shoulder by the private sector alone. Moreover, nuclear R&D programs take a lot of time to achieve. Therefore, financial support and R&D infrastructure from the government should be provided as appropriate regarding how mature each of technologies is. Additionally, human resources development and close international cooperation, close interaction with the regulatory body will also be imperative. To promote nuclear innovation, we have key factors and structural concept. Putting these together, we call this program NEXIP, means multiply nuclear energy by innovation promotion. The objective of the NEXIP program is to help accelerate the development of innovative nuclear technology through funding support, access to R&D facilities, and human resources. This year, for the beginning of the NEXIP program, we started the government funding support program focusing on nuclear safety and social demand. In conclusion, I'd like to summarize the way forward for Japanese nuclear innovation. The first one is to pursue various possible technologies. In detail, using the next 5 years until around 2023, we are going to make this technology competitive process come true by encouraging the private sector. The accelerated interaction of market forces will play a significant role. The second is to strengthen cooperation among related government institutions. There are several ministries which are related to nuclear energy policy. Efficient and focused administrative cooperation around Japan's nuclear policy is the key. And lastly, to promote international collaboration. In the nuclear domain, where global issues exist like export-import regulation, human resources development, and other challenges beyond borders, international collaboration is vital. This unique framework, IFNEC, would also play an important role facing new technologies and challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our speakers. The final session will be a panel that David Blee will moderate. And the focus is energy policy, looking at SMRs to 2030 and beyond. So I'll introduce Mr. David Blee from USNIC. Yep. Need the panelists' names?
Okay, so thank you. This has been a whirlwind, exciting 72 hours, and it's been great to be part of this. A lot of global buzz, a lot of global excitement. I think we're running a little bit behind schedule, but Ed, we're going to take this out of your time at the end. You're very eloquent, sometimes loquacious, but we look forward to your remarks. So I'm delighted to have for our capstone group here today, a group of experts, which I'll introduce. Hope you're sitting in the order. No, you're not sitting in the order of the program. So we've got Paul Murphy, the Managing Director of Murphy Energy and Infrastructure, closest to me. Amjad Gori, Energy Advisory Executive for AGS Advisory. Then we have Jonathan Hines, who is the President of UX Consulting. And last but not least, we have Chris Kadomsky, who is the lead nuclear for Bloomberg New Finance. So welcome to our panel here today. Our charge today is energy policy focus on SMR deployment to 2030, what new markets. So I'm going to join the folks over here. I guess we have a microphone. Someone left me a note. Oh, yeah, keep it short.
Don't ramble on. Yeah, I think that we're very.
This is from someone to actually said, make sure you thank me.
Paul has a mic, use his if that doesn't work.
Okay, everyone's mic working? Good. Okay, we'll go to it. The panel very wisely decided not to dispense with the soliloquies. We've really heard a really eloquent audience earlier. Certainly, again, kudos to the IFNEC team and also to the Department of Energy and the Office of the President for organizing this event today. It's been a tour de force. So we're going to, I sent these questions over to my wife last night. There's a lot of excitement in the Blee household about coming over to the White House, moderating a panel with all these distinguished guests. And I sent the questions over to her, and this morning at breakfast, she didn't say anything. Of course, it was 6 a.m., I think. But I just got a note for her saying, didn't say they were brilliant or creative or challenging. She said, I'm praying for your panel. So, okay. So here we go. We're gonna just jump right into it. As I mentioned, we're focused on one of our favorite things, which is deployment. And we are going to begin with the end in mind here. And so beginning with the end in mind, let's see, beginning with the end in mind. Let me find out. Okay. I had these organized, okay. So beginning with the end in mind, let's fast forward to 2030. Advanced nuclear is beyond first of a kind and looking at nth of a kind. For SMRs and micros, advanced nuclear, they're all interchangeable. How does this move the deployment barometer? I'm trying to ask Chris to kick this off.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here. So my boss, Mike Bloomberg, has a saying that in God we trust, all others bring data. So I'll try to answer that question with a few data points about what 2030 will going to bring. The Climate Action Conference, the United Nations Conference that ended in New York in September, they said that 66 countries, 93 companies, and 100 cities said that they're going to be carbon-free by 2050. Which is a pretty big challenge. What, 30 countries in the world plus have nuclear power plants. So suggests that there's going to be a pretty good growth in opportunities for nuclear power around the world. Bloomberg publishes what we call our New Energy Outlook. We publish it every single year. And we are very much, I guess, aggressive or optimistic about the deployment of renewables through 2050. And we suggest in that report that 50% of the capacity is going to be added between 2019 and 2050 is going to be renewables, and that the world will spend $13.3 trillion on new energy development. So a huge build out, and there is a big emphasis on renewables. And so where does that leave nuclear? And so my thinking is that it's very, very hard, and I happen to live in a solar-powered house in Southern California where there's a tremendous amount of solar radiation. It's a bright red dot on the solar insulation mat. There's no way that I can see how these carbon neutrality goals can be realized by 2050 timeframe without very aggressive deployment of nuclear. What I think is going to be key to making that happen is that we go ahead and get some technology, hardware into the field and operating. Once that happens, I think the realization will come from around the world that this is a viable technology that's safe, efficient, cost-effective, and very, very important. One of the things that I will say as a caveat is that the decision to invest in nuclear, according to our research, is much more than just about LCOE, the lowest cost of energy, least cost of energy. It's much more about the social and environmental opportunities that I don't think are properly realized or priced into the market right now by policymakers, or certainly not the global institutions like the World Bank. Think of this, and with this I'll stop. Green bonds. What is the value of green bonds issued to date in the world? It exceeded $1 trillion as of a couple of weeks ago. How much of the green bonds were allocated towards nuclear power? Zero.
So, Jonathan, what else, once you get past the nth of a kind and you've got deployment, what else needs to be added to the market recipe beyond licensing, surety, successful deployment, economical offerings, and monetization of nuclear energy assets?
Thanks, David. I guess you're basically laying out a future where everything's gone well. So that's a good thing. Hopefully we'll be there. I think, I've been doing SMR events since 2008, I think is the first time I went. And these conferences are enormously interesting and exciting because we talk a lot about nuclear not being extremely innovative or fun. It's sort of the old traditional nuclear energy that's been around forever, at least since the 1950s. And I think when you look at SMRs, this is the new age. And when you look at the competitive environment in energy, whether it's natural gas has been a big one, as well as the renewables that Chris was just talking about. Those markets have done a great job of marketing themselves, and they've been doing things, probably making their image well beyond what they actually are. I think nuclear has done the opposite. It's actually gone and undersold itself. And I think to add to, if you do get those successes that you just laid out by 2030 or so, success begets success. Failure begets more failure. And I think when you look at what could happen in a future where there are successes to build on, that's when you really got to push the envelope in terms of marketing. And, we live now in a day and age of social media, of, it's such a fast media environment. Every day there's something new coming up. By 2030, who knows what world we'll be living in, but I think it'll be moving even faster than now. if nuclear doesn't want to be left behind, it's got to speed up. And it's got to do so, I think, on an image basis more than anything else. I think the hardware is there. It's the software that's yet to be, catch up to what needs to happen in the future. So I look at what has to be added, that secret element, that secret spice that has to be added to the mix as marketing. And I really think that's going to move this market.
And maybe speed.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm Chad, stepping back for a second. Okay, we fast forward. We're going to step back here for a second. You've had a lot of experience in other industries, in particular with first of a kind. What kind of ingredients do we need to have government, industry moving forward to actually get these first of a kinds through so we can move to an nth of a kind?
Thank you, David. It's a privilege to be here, and I'm incredibly encouraged by the collaborative views that everyone shares on moving nuclear forward. My experience as a former developer and also a former banker dealt with basically conventional energy projects in what was then 20 years ago emerging markets, but what could be argued today are probably newly industrialized countries. The ingredients that I think make for the success of a first-of-a-kind project and a first-of-a-kind project to happen, I think technology. First of all, technology needs to be proven, and I've been involved in the nuclear sector for a relatively short time, which is a dozen years, and I had to wait for 10 years for a reference plant on large-scale nuclear. So the way that the speed of technology is quite slow in our business, unfortunately. I'm hoping that won't be the case from an SMR perspective, because we are getting close, and certainly in the United States, and certainly in other parts of the world, that as we've seen, they're moving forward. The other important aspect is that government needs to play multiple roles. I had the privilege of spending 6 months working with my colleagues from Great Britain here, and it was an incredible experience, and a lot of people brought together as part of the expert finance working group. And I think what we all agreed at the outset, and it was consistent throughout the 6 months that we met together, was that government has to play a major role. Government has to play multiple roles. They've got to have, first of all, you've got to have a legislative framework that people believe in, even if there's going to be subsequent changes of government. And you've got to be there to basically fill the gaps of risks that can't be taken by anybody else, much less when it comes to financing from the private sector. So the government, acts as perhaps a super investor or an investor in many cases for these projects to get off the ground. Government also provides a certain degree of as a guarantor for the debt that's going to be required from the private sector. Otherwise, you're not going to get private sector money. So what the government does, and then, certain risks, just for example, how do you mitigate revenue risk or market risk? And so I think Rebecca talked yesterday about a couple of structures. You've got to have the government's hand in all of these kinds of things. And I think that's where, that's part of the formula, in my view, in my experience, for success in the nuclear space.
Great. Well, fortunately, you heard some messages this morning from our legislators. We talked about some bipartisan efforts in this advanced nuclear space. I think it may be the most bipartisan issue in Washington. Of course, that doesn't say a whole lot right now.
No, I mean, the one thing I was going to say is, it's been hardest to get nuclear support in participatory democracies. So we all exist in some, and the success comes in those. Do you think France asked anybody in the 70s whether they should go nuclear. They didn't. They just did it. Yeah, even though France is a democracy, some would argue otherwise. But so that's, but someone's got to move the ball. And I think what I heard today, and I heard Secretary Perry and Senator Murkowski, I mean, this is the most excited I've been about the nuclear space in a long time.
Fantastic. Paul, commensurate with the charge of our panel here today, we've heard a lot about electricity. There's some of the speakers talked today about some of the other areas where advanced nuclear can play a role. Can you talk about things beyond producing generation of electricity for advanced nuclear, potential and opportunity there?
Thank you, and thank you to our host. It's an honor to be here. I think people have already touched on sort of the laundry list of things that SMRs can do. And I think what needs to happen, of course, is all the vendors have to decide what they're going to do first. It's nice to say I might be able to do 10 things, but you got to do one of them first. And so I think getting to the market, proving the technology, showing that you can deliver is very important. And I think all these applications become very interesting because I think what we need to see for the industry, but more for global development, is a paradigm shift in how we look at nuclear power. And I think we're still sort of stuck in this is a technology exercise. And, my reactor is better than yours, and mine can make toast, and no, mine can make eggs Benedict, and, I mean, everybody's competing about whose is better. But at the end of the day, I think what we need to see is we need to turn this into real projects. And that applies to any of these applications because it gets really exciting when you look especially at the developing world and you say, okay, they need electricity, they have growing populations, so they need even more. A lot of these countries are in areas with water scarcity, and then we throw population growth on top of it and industrialization and climate change. It's just more and more and more. We need to solve that problem. And I think we need to get into the problem-solving aspect of this and the project delivery aspect of this so that we take the technologies and start focusing exactly on these applications. So, we heard yesterday the presentation on the smart reactor that's being designed for desalination. That starts to get interesting because now we have a thing. Now we've got to turn that thing into an actual project and then multiple projects on top of that. And I think that project delivery exercise starts to change how we view nuclear. Instead of seeing it as some sort of competitive thing in the market, some product that competes against everything else, we need to envision it more as a problem-solving tool because we got a lot of problems we have to solve. And so when you think of concepts like critical infrastructure, when we turn the switch on the wall, the lights are supposed to come on. And that's really important for people that don't have power, but it becomes ridiculously important for all of us that, when my children go to sleep at night, they plug in like 27 different devices in the house to charge for the next day. And we're becoming more and more dependent on electricity to live in industrial societies at the standard of living we want. So instead of viewing it like we're trying to sell a car and my car is better than yours, it's a problem-solving tool to achieve something much greater. And that gets into some of the things that Chris mentioned, which are we run financial models to decide what projects we're going to build and what we don't. And we've talked throughout the week about how financial models are nice, but after 30 years, everything discounts to zero, so who cares? And we're talking about technologies that are going to last far beyond that. And we're talking about technologies that achieve energy security, energy diversity, clean energy. Those things don't plug into a financial model. And even if we had a number, we'd all disagree as to what that number should be. So you can look at your financial models and make decisions, but then you have to layer in all these other factors that, again, go back to these are tools to achieve other goals, not just it's a different way to produce electricity. It's something much bigger than that. And so by moving into that project mentality, into that problem-solving mentality, not that the engineering isn't important, it's hugely important. Not that the regulatory isn't important, it's hugely important. But we have to get to the next level, and part of getting to the next level is we have to go much faster. You know, the Black Crowes announced earlier this week that they're reuniting. They have a great song that has the line, "Can you make this thing go faster?" We've got to go a lot faster. When you look at the UAE and the Koreans who've done an amazing job with Baraka, start to finish on the first unit, it's going to be 14 years. That's still a really long time. They have a lot of money. So if it's taking them 14 years, what's it going to take everybody else? That's not an acceptable result if we want nuclear to do all the things that we need it to do.
Hey, well, I'm going to open this up to the panel here in terms of MOUs are flying. We've got interest flourishing, as you've heard this morning, as you can see in this room. When it comes to newcomer countries in particular, are the attributes of advanced nuclear a game changer? Who wants to take that?
I guess it got passed down the line. I think that in developing markets, they really need to decide what they're trying to do with their technology selection, be it nuclear, be it light water reactors, be it other various types of technology, and to understand where their investment is going to take not just the project, but the country as a whole. And I say that I was sitting in Russia one time at one of their nuclear reactors listening to a conversation about developing nuclear power plants in Africa. And one of the participants was a woman from the Ministry of Energy, didn't say very much at all. But then we started talking about knowledge transfer, job creation, and she really perked up and enjoying the conversation. So their technology selection was part of a bigger issue that they were really interested in not just buying a project, getting a reactor. They were trying to sort of create an industry to transfer the knowledge so that going forward, they had a knowledge industry, a knowledge transfer which could take them. And so how you decide whether or not to get a light water reactor technology or advanced reactor technology that can do other things is a matter that is very, very, I think, country-specific and project-specific. And I'll pass it on to my distinguished colleagues to take it from there.
We'll get one other review. Jonathan?
Yeah, I'll add a little. My company does a lot of market analyses, and I study, all the countries around the world that are potential users of nuclear power, and pretty much the entire list is there. But when you look a little deeper at the data, as Chris mentioned, you have to acknowledge that there are several countries that obviously have very different needs for energy down the road. You're going to have to look at quite a few of these technologies needing to be proven and built somewhere else before a newcomer country accepts them. They're not going to be the first movers. I think a lot of the newcomer countries want confidence that the technology that they may choose is reliable and will be there. I think, I'm not going to choose a technology one over the other, but I do think for a lot of the more developing countries, it's not just the modularity, but I think micro-reactors might be a great first step. Not to say that they don't want bigger energy supply down the road, but a 5 or 10 megawatt reactor that sort of gets shipped in, put down, and is pretty easy to operate, that could be a real game changer. That kind of technology, as opposed to one where you have to a lot of local infrastructure and all that. If you really wanted to move fast, as we were talking about, I think the micro-reactor market really needs to be looked at very closely. Nothing against all the other technologies out there, but of course there are countries. We heard from Poland yesterday. We heard from several countries that have much larger energy needs. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. And I think obviously the key is going to be getting some of these technologies licensed and proven in some of the more well-established nuclear countries, so that newcomers will be confident with them.
MJ?
Yes. I think, we all talk about nuclear in the context of energy security, reliability, and affordability. I think from an SMR, for SMRs, for emerging economies, those are game changers. I mean, they can afford small, instead of paying 10, 12, 20 billion like our UAE friends did, which they can't afford. I think having access to, less expensive, assuming the technology is proven, technology is great. It's a great to add in a 400 megawatt SMR to the existing energy mix. Two countries that come to mind, in Tunisia, they're not a big country, but they are very concerned about energy security. And they, I think, SMR is on their radar very strongly, and they're kind of waiting for a proven technology to emerge. And the other country that I was recently in was Sri Lanka. They have grand ambitions, but I think the question of what can they afford, and they're keen on nuclear, but what can they actually afford? And maybe it's start out with a small, micro reactor, but then you move on to a couple 100 megawatt reactor. So the fact that you can get it on, assuming, once again, the big assumption we all have to make is that the technologically proven, but you can get them online faster, and it meets, and then you have a supply chain that comes along with that. You have you're educating the local workforce in most of these countries. They have a highly educated workforce as well, and I think it's a massive game changer.
Yeah, we've had a financial conundrum sometimes when it's come to the larger projects. Is advanced nuclear, in your opinion, hopefully the answer will be yes, just to lead the panel, disruptive enough to break this paradox of once you get into, we've heard about XM, possibly the DFC. What about the impact on the financial equation with respect to the old chicken and egg game on project financing? Paul?
I'll give the classic lawyer answer of it depends. I think that there, as was said by the panel already, you need to prove the technology, and proving the technology really is a development cost. And so, how can we support some of these reactor developers in proving the technology? And I think that is the key, to show that they can build it and that it works. And that there's another thing we have to be careful of in all that, which is we like to talk in the SMR context of modular construction, factory. Where's your factory? And are you going to build a factory without a ton of orders? Probably not. So how do we get those factories built so that we can create all the efficiencies that may need to occur? So I think showing how we get these projects to market is critical. And then once you decide that as a country or as a jurisdiction that I need this and that the people support it, you can finance just about anything if you really want to do it. And people look and say, well, what does that even mean? But when you start going down the path of things, people think that there's some kind of complex financing structure that's going to solve all problems. And really, the art in all this is keeping it fairly simple. And if there's the public support and the political support to do the project, you can find ways to finance it. In the UK, they're doing a project called the Thames Tideway Tunnel, where there was sewage going into the Thames, and they didn't really decide on all these different. They said, we need to fix that, so let's do the project, and we'll put in place. It's a complicated project. It's hard. We need to impose a structure on the project because we've already determined we have to do the project. And so I think this first wave of nuclear is going to be with countries, jurisdictions saying, I need this. Almost not relative to everything else, I need this. And once we get that level of support, we can put the financing structures in place to do it, even for countries that maybe don't have all the resources that some of the others do. I mean, if you have the money, of course, that makes it easier. But I think justifying the policy tools. You know, we heard Senator Murkowski talking about some of the legislation that's being put forward in this country and the legislation that's already passed that has bipartisan support. That's wonderful. But it shows that if there's the will, a lot can be done. That will can't just come from the industry. It's got to come from other places, which gets into a lot of education and public outreach.
Let's go to the macro here for a second. We heard from some of our presenters today, the Nuclear Energy Agency, that people are waking up to the fact that you can't get to zero carbon without nuclear energy. We also heard that from the IAEA as well, another esteemed source. So do you agree with that, that people are starting to realize when they do the math that you can't get to zero carbon without nuclear energy?
I'll start. Honestly, when you sit on an airplane and ask someone or they ask you what you do and you say, I'm a nuclear, most of the time they shy away from you after that. If you told them you work in solar or wind, they'd probably talk your head off. Yeah. So I think, no, back to my marketing discussion, I think honestly the renewables have done a great job to convince folks that we can do it all with just solar and wind and maybe batteries down the road. I'm all for all those, don't get me wrong, but I think there has to be an honest, very honest acceptance that those are not going to be all that we need. It's clearly going to require all hands on deck, and this is where advanced nuclear really has a great opportunity, which is to fit into that future energy mix, find ways to actually load follow, to work to store maybe, desalination could actually be a storage mechanism. As when you don't need the electricity because the wind's blowing, you produce water, or you go the other way when the wind isn't blowing. There's all kinds of great hybrid approaches that nuclear could fit into with renewables. But I don't think, we need to keep telling the story that renewables alone probably won't do it.
Other thoughts?
I think this is a very important point. I just want to bring up a small anecdote. I'm a former banker because I used to work for an institution, unnamed, European, who my mandate was to develop the nuclear advisory business. And so, we had small success, and then what happened was that the bank's perception sorely changed. And when I went to fight for my deal, the head of London office where I'm based said to me, Judd, we're a green bank. How can we be seen to support nuclear? And I was a bit flabbergasted. And I think a lot of people has this existential block that, if you're a supporter of renewables, you can't support nuclear. So that's a hurdle that needs to be overcome. And
Chris, we've had our rose-colored goggles on here. I know you're always capable of providing some sobering remarks in this area. Can you bring us down to, earth again?
Two anecdotes. The first, I was in one of your meetings, David, talking to one of your board members, and I told them, I think that the nuclear energy industry needs to cooperate and work with the renewable energy industry. And I was immediately asked to leave the room. And the second anecdote, I can't remember. I now remember when I was first started doing this with the young people that I work with, and young people I work with at Bloomberg are very smart energy analysts who believe that nuclear is a very strange thing. And I told them I was going to a spent fuel conference in Las Vegas, and they asked me, are there going to be protests there? And I said, protests? Why are there going to be protests? That was the perception that a lot of these younger generation, the millennials, have about nuclear. That is a technology that is in outer space somewhere. As a professor at NYU, I make it a very big point to take people to nuclear power plants, and when I have students look into the spent fuel pool at the Indian Point nuclear power plant, their eyes wide open, open wide, and they come to realize that a lot of the things that they're told about nuclear power are simply not true. And I've had students become very aggressive defenders about the promise that nuclear power holds in the future. Let's face it, there's been very little nuclear innovation in the last X number of years. I look at this period right now, the last few years of the nuclear power, or my involvement in the nuclear power industry, as the darkness before the dawn. It's always very dark. I am very, very optimistic about the future of advanced reactors, small modular reactors, because I think that there is no way that renewables is going to carry the day without a very strong complement from nuclear powers. Renewables are a very good solution to part of the problem. Nuclear is a very good solution to part of the problem as well.
I just want to say that I found that now at cocktail parties when we mention advanced nuclear, people are really spellbound. I don't know whether it's the martinis or the subject matter, but it seems to be, it's tipping in the right direction.
In your case, I'm sure it's the martinis.
Oh gosh, that's on national TV before millions of people. What are my children going to think? Okay, so with respect, the ever visionary Bill Magwood, Director General of the Nuclear Energy Agency, mentioned that there is a window of opportunity here. So how big a window of opportunity? I'm going to go down the line, starting you with Paul. How big a window of opportunity before that window closes for advanced nuclear?
I don't think it's that big a window. I think, when we talk about nuclear planning, and the whole point of this panel was to look 10 years into the future. I think in the nuclear industry, 10 years is now, because of all the planning that has to be put in place. For some of the countries, they have to get their regulatory structure in order. They have to be ready for nuclear. So there's a piece to all this that is, it's fine if we get the technologies ready, but then who are we going to sell them to? And while there may be a lot of interest, those clients then have to be ready to take on the nuclear technology, and there's a lot to go into that. So really to hit sort of a 2030 to 2040 window, stuff has to be happening now. And we see more and more projections about climate change and missing targets. We're going to start to hit some crisis points, and people are going to have the tools that are available to them at that point to solve that problem. And so I think we have to think of advanced nuclear technologies in stages. We need stuff very quickly. That doesn't preclude more advanced things for later, but if we wait too long, the people that are saying, I have to solve a problem, they're going to use the things that are available to them, imperfect as they may be. And so I think part of it is for a lot of the advanced nuclear countries to be working with the newcomers very aggressively to help them get ready for the technology to solve the problems that they're already grappling with that are only going to get worse in the next 10 years. And if we don't see that movement in the next 10 years, we can't sort of do this in series. It's got to be in parallel. All these things have to be moving at the same time so that we sort of get to that target point all at the same time and then start putting these in place. Because especially in the SMR business, it's a volume business. If you sell one SMR every 5 years, you're going to be out of business. So we need to sell a lot of these things to sustain the business, to support the factory, to do all those things. But then to solve the problems we need to solve, we have to have a readily available tool with the financing, with the regulatory support, and with kind of this standard. We talk about standardization. It's got to be standardization of the entire program. So it's not just the reactor, the plant design that everybody just accepts. It's got to be a standardization of the entire delivery model. And if we can do that, we can put these things in place a lot faster, much more widely.
Amjad?
I would argue that the window won't close, and I would argue that because, during the first Renaissance in the 2000s, there was a lot of optimism, but I don't think anything was really done. Whereas now, you look at countries like, Great Britain, Canada, and U.S. from what we heard today, I mean, everybody's geared up. And you've got small technology developers, completely engaged. So I think we ought not to wait. But with the momentum that I see, I don't think it's actually going to close. So I am very optimistic about that. So, but it. But our nuclear community needs to work together to pull this off. So.
Yeah, I look at the 2030 target is clearly a tough one. The next 10 years, will make or break a lot of things in this industry. But I look a little further out. I think 2050. IPCC now has targets out to 2050, and you look at what really needs to happen if we are going to turn the corner on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So I think you have to look at this bigger picture. But when you look at a big picture, the potential for nuclear, doubling by 2050 from today is serious. It's there. There is that potential. But that's from a top-down perspective. When you look at the numbers, you add them up. Okay, the world should and requires that much clean energy out in the future, and nuclear should get this slice of that. But what that sort of fails to sometimes recognize is that this is going to be one project at a time, building up from the bottom up. It's not from the top down. This industry has to work from the bottom up, and those projects, those early projects, are going to make or break this. So I do think the next 10 years are very critical. But achieving that doubling, let's say, by 2050, roughly, of nuclear power, it's not going to be, it's not just going to happen overnight, and it's going to require massive upscaling of a lot of the capabilities that we have. So I think working on those building blocks today, that's what's going to be needed for that longer-term future.
Chris?
I'll take the opposing view and think that there is a window that's open now that could very well close much faster than we realize. And I point to technology innovation in areas besides the nuclear power industry. We've seen tremendous cost curves, declines with solar, with wind, and now batteries. And sometimes, with all due respect to the policymakers in this room, policymakers make decisions without the best information that are there. And sometimes you take the easier path as perhaps one that they choose as opposed to the more technically correct path. And so decisions are being made that will be selecting technologies that are perhaps in the long run not best in order to realize short-term decisions. So a solution that would rely on solar, wind, and battery technology, for example, is, I think, a threat that the nuclear energy industry and SMR developers should not take very, very likely. Also coming down the pike is fusion technology. Those fusion advocates that I talk to say that there's a lot of advantages to fusion over fission, and there is an aggressive increase in the amount of money that's being spent by some of the billionaires in the world who are putting money into fusion technology. And that's something that the advanced nuclear SMRs are caught in between renewables and storage and fusion looming.
Well, interesting. We got a variety of opinions there. The answer is 7.5 years, by the way. So now just go with you, Chris. We're to go down the line for the last round. We got 3 minutes to do this. One word: biggest opportunity, biggest challenge for advanced nuclear. Doesn't have to be one word for both of them.
Maybe 2 or 3. The biggest opportunity is in carbon mitigation, and the biggest challenge is in construction of prototypes.
you sort of stole my challenge, my opportunity. I think the opportunity definitely is, the future energy mix, as I talked about, with fitting in with renewables. I mean, I think also maybe looking for potentially that the hydrogen economy also is another one. On the challenge, I think it's actually, I think, going to be, in my view, not financing, not technology issues. I think it's going to be the people. If you can get the people to really change their view on what nuclear is and stands for and what it can be, the public will make this we're in a world now where grassroots and all that really change things overnight. And I think if you can get the grassroots behind nuclear, then that's probably the biggest challenge.
Amjad?
I think the greatest opportunity is the multiplicity of applications for small modular reactors. I mean, it's just a whole host of applications that can be used with SMRs. The challenges are going to be, again, financing, and then the financing comes with the right kind of structures, and the structure has to be backstopped in many cases, at least at the outset, by the governments. Just to go back, I've been saying that I'm optimistic, and I failed to mention. I mentioned the U.S., I mentioned Canada, I mentioned the U.K. I was incredibly impressed by our Russian colleagues and what they've done in that front, and especially also with the smart technology, the Koreans. So please, I should have had you as part of the mix earlier, but I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Paul, you have the next to last word.
Sure. I would say the overlay of climate change and water scarcity, so energy and desalination, I think that is a very near-term and a very long-term opportunity. I think the biggest challenge is that we have to really question our traditional thinking. And we need to challenge some of the models that we've put in place that aren't delivering the results that we need. And that's not to say that it's blue sky thinking that can't pass a straight face test, but we really have to look at why things aren't going as fast as they are and start to think, how can we address those very things with maybe some new ideas, especially for the newcomer countries, especially for the developing world that have some unique challenges that, with the standards and the processes we put in place, maybe we've set too high a barrier. And, reassess without compromising safety, security safeguards, of course, but that reassessment, I think, has to occur.
Well, I want to thank our very articulate panel. I think we didn't rehearse this, so I think guarded optimism, if not outright, or optimism in some cases. Very much appreciated, very constructive comments. I want to, of course, thank our audience here today, and again, the presenters and organizers, and of course, the hundreds of thousands watching online, if not millions. So thank you for our panel.
Thank you, David. Talking about marketing, Jonathan told us something very insightful about marketing today. When we were taking the administration 4 years ago, my colleague and friend, the Undersecretary of Renewable Energy, told me outside, there are in the patio de las Palmeras, in the pink house. The pink house is our White House. Pink, white, tomato, yeah. There are two cars. One is a Porsche Cayenne, new, shiny, electric. And the other one is a Ford Falcon 1958. Pretty used, 500,000 miles. Guess what is yours, he told me, the Undersecretary of Renewable. So, talking about marketing, right? We need to focus on our marketing. I agree with that. Okay. Hello again. As the IFNEC steering group chairperson, I would like to make a couple of remarks to this productive session of meetings we are concluding today. Before my mentor's closing remarks here. In the first place, I would like to sincerely thank you all for attending this ministerial conference. It has been an absolute honor to receive you here as IFNEC chairperson, and it was a privilege to be able to join all these high-level personalities in one room, and what a room, right? To get immersed in the world of SMRs and advanced nuclear and set a precedent for further local action and global agenda setting. Thank you all for dedicating your valuable time to these discussions. I am sure the conversations and connections that took place here will have positive impact in the international scenario in a short period of time. At the same time, not only this ministerial conference is coming to an end, but a cycle is ending for me as well. The role of IFNEC Steering Group Chairperson will be taken by another representative in 2020. Welcome, Susie, and please come with me for a couple of minutes here. Come on. Come here. Stand by my side. Stand by my side. I have something to give you. During the last 2 years, as chairperson, I had the fascinating opportunity to meet representatives from different nations attending the IFNEC meetings and the working groups. And during this period, I had the privilege to work with a group of distinguished vice chairs, Mr. Shirley Shan, Mr. Collins Yuma, Mr. Vladimir Artisyuk, and of course, Mrs. Susie Jaworowski, and co-chairs, Zbigniew Kubacki, Alex Burkhardt, Thomas Sagar, and Sean Tyson, as well with the IFNEC Secretariat. Working with this amazing group of people was extremely enriching and always a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me this journey. During my time as chairperson, I have one main objective, turning IFNEC into a valuable agenda-setting framework that proved to be effective in setting precedent for succeeding and reaching discussions in the global arena. Step by step, this is being achieved, and this ministerial conference is a concrete proof of that. In that sense, I encourage the next IFNEC leader here to keep working towards that purpose, having faith that this type of international dialogue instances create networks and set important agenda parameters that will cause positive impact in further tangible international cooperation. 4 years ago, in that moment, at the Pink House, when I started my work as Deputy Secretary, in my country there was a lot of talk about the renewables revolution and the end of nuclear energy. What did we do? We were not tempted to close ourselves in a defensive speech against renewable energy. We did what we had to do because we were convinced that nuclear energy was part of the solution. But for that, we had to bet on innovation again. I once said, Facundo, I'm sure you remember, that our nuclear sector had to be a factory of SMRs because that's what we knew how to do. And it is. We invested all the money that we had. We concentrated that public investment in our SMR prototype in order to have a prototype working in 2022. But we are not the heroes. I mean, let me tell you something. Nuclear energy means a lot of things, but means jobs for the people, too. And this is very, very important because technology means jobs. So we need to focus on that, too. But we are not the heroes of this story. They are the ones who took risk in difficult times. Those who bet on the long term, even facing crises, bankruptcies, etc. And those who bet on the future and put their eyes there. Now that the future is just around the corner, as I said last night, I want to say that the heroes are you, the industry, here and all over the world. So, thank you very much. Thanks for that. We need sometimes less bureaucracy and more proactivity. To finish off, thank you for supporting my work these years and look forward to finding you in the nuclear field in other opportunities. Susie, let's wait a minute. Thank you for your enthusiasm, by the way. So, 2 years ago, I received this pencil from Ed McGuinness. Now it's yours. Take it as a torch. as a responsibility, as a huge responsibility of our work here. Once again, thank you for joining us, for supporting our work, and for working hard with us this week. Arnold Schwarzenegger, before being elected as governor of California, said once, "Hasta la vista." Thank you. Now, I introduce the first member of this exclusive club, Ed McGuinness.
Yes. Okay. She's whispering something, but I can't tell you what it was. It's a secret. No. It is a tour de force, what we witnessed today. I agree with David Blee. It is humbling, remarkable, inspiring to see incredible leaders. Secretary Perry, I've been blessed to have worked with him for 4 years and really 3 years and have that enthusiasm and leadership. But I was thinking about everything that was said today. And what I thought it would be useful is to offer you what I believe has made IFNEC unique. We say that, we use the word unique, but I have to go back briefly to 2006 under President Bush. And the idea was we need an international group focused on the peaceful use of nuclear energy, not just safety, not just national security, but nuclear energy. We need to get them together. By that time, 2006, I was working in the nuclear security arena. I had stood up a global radiological threat reduction program. I had a little experience in that area. And late in 2006, they actually launched Global Nuclear Energy Partnership, GNEP. And they got some funding for the R&D, the nuclear energy, but they hadn't figured out how to stand up the G and the P, the global partnership. I was just lucky. I was in a unique position, and I was asked, Ed, would you like to help add the G and the P to GNEP? Because we don't have any partners, but we're called the Global Nuclear Energy Partnership. And so I had this unique opportunity. Al Burkhart was there, part of the original group, and that was the moment to, I think, set what is unique in IFNEC. So we had a couple of discussions. I realized that I had a complete whiteboard, basically, to map out how we would envision this. Many people said, you need a hierarchy, like the United Nations, National Security Council. You need to limit the membership. Don't go with a consensus-based approach. You'll never get decisions made. And my thought was, part because I'm a little stubborn, my thought was, how about we do the exact opposite? We have an international framework that is strictly voluntary. We're not going to pressure people or countries into that. It's going to be co-equal. Whether you're Ghana, whether you're Kenya, whether you're China, whether you're Armenia, whether you're Argentina, for the purpose of this international framework, everybody gets the same vote. Everyone is co-equal. And we're going to be making decisions where if we don't all agree, we're not going to do it at all. I had people say, Ed, are you kidding me? We'll never get decisions made. We pushed hard. There was vigorous debate, not only in Washington, but internationally with certain partners thinking that we were going to be doomed and not succeed. Well, in 2007, we launched GNEP, and we had 16 countries in Vienna. Director General Al Baradei was there. Al Burkhart was a part of that process. A few colleagues here were there. Jordan was there. Kamala Raj was there, and Khalid Toukan was there. And 2 years later, in 2009, we're meeting in Accra, Ghana, and for many different policy and other reasons, we decided it's time to further update GNEP. And we landed on, included the International Framework for Nuclear Energy Cooperation, IFNEC. And we grew from there. Today, IFNEC is 65 countries total, 4 international organizations. Look where you're meeting. You're meeting in the White House. IFNEC has arrived. IFNEC has now gotten on center stage globally. IFNEC is in a position to have major, long-lasting impact for the good of humanity. And I would say a few things that have been the cornerstones of what operationally makes IFNEC unique. One is its diversity. We have incredible diversity. And what I mean by diversity is we have countries at all major stages of economic and technological development, geographically around the world, politically diverse, very diverse, from Germany to Canada, to the US, to China. How is it that we have operated in such a harmonious way throughout those years? And I would say it's the respect for the diversity of the countries. It's the respect for us working co-equally. And it's the commitment to focus on a common set of values. And those values, I would say, the cornerstone is very straightforward. The safe, secure, and I would say affordable use of nuclear energy, full stop. So it has been my honor to have been a part of what I see as a family. 13 years I had been involved with first GNEP and then IFNEC. And a few things in my life have moved me more than being a part of this journey. And I am so proud of being able to look back in 13 years and knowing that we did this together. And this is just the beginning. So the future is incredibly bright. You have incredible headroom for IFNEC. So I want to wish everybody all the very best in IFNEC. And you're going to have a huge supporter in me. I'm in the science and technology world now. Nuclear is right in the center of that. Innovation, transformation, you all are right in the front. So thank you all so very much for the time. Thank you for the opportunity.
Just as we wrap up, I just want to make this clear for exit procedures. Pink badges will exit over here. Green badges will exit over here. We do have a hard stop at 12:30, so please make this as quick as possible.